to the Wild Nova podcast. I'm your host, Janine O'Brien. Join me as we explore holistic health for your body, mind, and spirit through inspiring interviews with experts and seekers. It's all about a balanced and fulfilling life. So let's dive in. This week on the Wild Nova podcast, I am so thrilled to be introducing to you Hanan Merabi. Hanan is a nurse leader and the founder of a nonprofit organization called Earth's Angels. Hanan has a remarkable story of grit and fortitude. Orphaned young in Ghana, due to the lack of basic health care, Hanan always knew that she would make a difference in other people's lives. So please join me in welcoming Hanan Merabi to the Wild Nova podcast. I am so excited, and I want to thank Hanan for joining me today on the Wild Nova podcast. It's amazing to have you here. As soon as we connected and I started diving more into you and your story, I was like, oh my God, I need you on now.
No, I'm so glad to hear that. I felt like we needed to connect. And as soon as we did, it was like, boom, we need to work together. So I'm so happy to be here and so glad we could make this work. Thanks for having me, Janine.
Of course. So I want to ask you the first question I ask absolutely everybody on the podcast, as long as I remember. What were you like as a child?
I was just like this, big old smile all the time. I don't think our spirit ever changes, right? I mean, we can change and we can develop and we can grow, but I believe that our integral soul, if you will, just doesn't go away. It doesn't change. And I think this was me. I've always been bubbly, big extrovert. I love having people around me. I was a dreaming actress and singer when I was little. My dream was always to be an actress. And so I was always performing and dancing and, in theater and all the things as a kid. Lots of friends. I went to the same school from age 3 till 15. So everybody knew me, from the janitors to the head mistress, we called her, and everybody knew me by name. I was like the mentor for all the new kids, and just full of life. Always have been.
Yeah, that's amazing. I find a lot of the times, or when personally I was looking back, when I was trying to find somebody for me personally to look up to as to who I wanted to be, kind of when I grew up, even though I am grown up, it was like, who do I want to build myself into? What am I aspiring to? Honestly, it was 5-year-old Janine. It was like, she was fun. She was adventurous. She didn't have the trauma of things, of being scared. She was so talkative. It was ridiculous sometimes. And oh man, I would run around and play with animals and talk to the birds and be that weird kid. And
Just
I was
free.
I just want to be me, authentically me. I'm like, that's incredible.
I love to hear that. It's funny you say that because I remember when I was little, maybe middle school age, I was asked, the whole class was asked, who do you want to be? Or who's your hero? Or who's your, icon? And with my crazy life story, which I know we'll get to here soon, and just like you said, I was such a happy child. I couldn't think of anyone that I wanted to be. I was very happy just being me, and have never actually had issue with that, which is kind of cool considering my crazy and very traumatic life. So that's awesome to hear someone else say that. Like, I just loved being me, right? And free
Yeah.
and myself. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I find I didn't realize until I got older, a lot of the things I didn't like about myself or had a harder time with myself was trauma based. And I find it's like that for a lot of people. And it's like my shyness or like not willing to put myself out there or all of these things that I thought were me. And I was like, no, those are all just trauma. They're like these masks
Yes,
and layers that I'm putting on for protection. Yeah.
absolutely.
So
It's
you were
part of growing
saying,
up and losing that
yeah,
innocence.
yeah. So you're saying you went to the same school till 15. I know your story
Yes,
because I'm obsessive with research when I do these podcasts. I can't help myself. It's half of the
love
fun.
that.
So tell me about the first few years of your life, even before 15. What did those look
Okay.
like?
Sure. Yeah, a lot happened before 15. So at age 3, my mother died suddenly. She was 36. So I was born and raised in Ghana. I am Lebanese Ghanaian mixed, which sounds a little crazy, but in Ghana it's actually quite common because there are Lebanese all over the world, and Lebanese are entrepreneurs by spirit. So
Yes.
after the war in the 70s, a lot of us sort of scattered around the globe, and that's why there are more Lebanese outside of Lebanon than in Lebanon. And so my family was one of those that settled in Ghana looking for trade. A lot of them, of my family members, got into the gold business. Um, and so my dad was full Lebanese. He and his family settled in Ghana when he was a young teen. And then my mom was mixed Lebanese, Ghanaian, already, born and raised in Ghana. So they met, settled there, and built a life there. My dad had 2 kids before he met my mom, and then they had 4 together. So there was 6 of us, and I'm the
Wow.
youngest. Yes, I'm the youngest of 6. So at age 3, my mom died suddenly. She had some um, weird condition where like her nose was dripping, leaking, and that's what they all thought. Now, granted, nobody was medical when I was a child, so they just had their ideas of what it was. I know that she was supposed to have surgery in the UK. She never had the surgery. After becoming a nurse and talking to doctors myself, doing my own research, I think she was leaking cerebral spinal fluid from her nose and went septic and died at 36. Didn't get the treatment she needed in Ghana and died like that same day that she had fell into a stroke and died. And so at age 3, I was sent to live with my grandma and aunt.
Mhm.
And those were the days where kids weren't talked to and asked, "Hey, what do you want? What would you prefer?" Especially not in my culture, my African and Arab culture. You didn't speak to kids like we do now. So no one
Yeah.
asked me what I wanted or what I needed or how I felt. They actually never told me my mother died. They told me she went to the UK because those were also the days where you just lied to kids to sweep it under the rug.
Yeah.
And so I was told she was in London visiting and that she would return. And so I went to go live with my grandma and aunt, but I was the only one sent to live with them. And I think my dad thought, you know what, she needs a mother in her life.
Yeah.
And my aunt had 2 young kids who were close to my age. So I think he thought he was doing me a service, a good thing, to have those maternal figures.
Yeah.
However, that was really tough. Those years
Mhm.
were really difficult. My grandma, ruled with an iron fist, and my aunt was just, Cruella, for lack of a better term. Just mean from day one. I mean, she would,
Yeah.
yell at me for not having clothes that my father didn't bring, when he dropped me off, and I was 3. What did I know, right? So
Yeah.
so that was really tough. And then when I was 8, my father died too. And about a year or so, maybe 2 before he died, my siblings slowly moved in with me as well
Mm.
for some other reasons. My dad had financial issues going on.
Yeah.
And he was depressed after my mom died. He was going through a lot. So now my siblings joined me in my grandma's house. It was all 4 of us, my aunt's 2 kids, my aunt, and my grandma.
Oh my God.
And it was a lot. And then my
Yeah.
dad died at 8.
Mhm.
And so now I'm orphaned. And there began the crazy journey of Hanan.
Yeah. It's insane how much you went through just in the first few years of your life, like losing both parents, but honestly, kind of losing your dad before actually losing him. Like, you losing that
Yes,
male figure is massive. Like, yeah,
absolutely. And never, and not having been part of that communication, like, hey, and then you're going to your grandma's because, or hey, because I remember crying outside my grandma's house when he would drop me off,
yeah,
begging him to go with him and my siblings. I just wanted to be with him. Um, and not being part of those decisions or part of that discussion or anything. I had no clue what was going on. I thought my mom was
yeah.
in the UK, and here I
How long
was with.
until they actually told you that she had passed away?
So no one ever told me. My brother, who's a year and a half older than me, he has a better memory than I do in those years,
Mhm.
for of those years, and he says to me that we went to the cemetery, my dad and him and I,
Mm.
and we went to go put some flowers on, like his dad's grave, and while we were there visiting and praying, a bird landed on my
Mm.
mother's grave, and my dad says to us, "You see where the bird just landed? That's your mother's grave."
Jesus.
And
Like,
he's told me that story only since I've been a woman, and I mean, it was just like crippling to
yeah,
hear that's how we were told. That's how we were told. And I don't remember that, probably blocked it out. I mean, those years were so traumatic for me
yeah,
because I was being emotionally and verbally abused every single day from age 3, and
yeah.
so I don't remember that time too much, but he reminds me that that's how we were told.
Well, and it's one thing, it's hard because it felt like both of your parents, it would have seemed like they abandoned you on purpose at the beginning. Like knowing your mom left and just didn't come back, it's almost better to know that she died because then it wasn't her
Absolutely.
choice. Like
100%.
feeling, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
So,
definitely felt like I didn't know what I felt then,
yeah,
right? But now I look back and try to make sense of it all, and I think, gosh, it would have been so nice if they had just told me,
yeah,
or when she fell ill that morning, because it took her, I think, most of the day to die. It would have been nice to be
yeah,
able to be part of that, run to the hospital and say my goodbyes, like they thought they were shielding and protecting, but really it was a hindrance at the end of the day.
oh God. Yeah, I don't know. It's so hard because I feel like no matter what parents do, it's always going to be wrong. But this was like so wrong.
On so many levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at that point, you were about 15. And I know you ended up moving over to the States at about 15.
Yes. So I was 8 when my dad died. So now me and my
Yeah.
siblings are with my grandma. And then around 14,
Hmm.
and by they, my grandma and aunt had a meeting with us kids and told us that grandma was ailing and probably wouldn't make, the prognosis was poor.
Yeah.
And so now they had to figure out what was the next move for my siblings and I. Well, because I'm the youngest, all the others had a plan. I was 14, so my sister was college age,
Yeah.
and my other brothers, they had plans. I was the only one without who was going to need a home. And
Yeah.
so the discussion was I had an uncle who had moved to the States, I think before I was born or when I was very little. I don't remember him as a child. He
Yeah.
had moved to the States with his wife and kids, and that they could adopt me to bring me to the States and to give me a home also, because I was only 15. So that's how that sort of transitioned.
Do you remember kind of the feeling of like when they were telling you? Because that would be mixed to me, like happy and sad at the same time.
So at that time, I was elated. I was elated because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get out of jail. This is my get out of jail card.
Yeah.
Like I was
Yeah.
so ecstatic that I couldn't think about any of the possible negatives, nor did anyone mention any negatives, nor did anyone say, hey, watch out for this or watch out. Like there was no therapy, there was no counseling, there was no,
Yeah.
you know, there was no person that's, got on their knees and said, hey, Anan, you're going to the States, watch out for this and that, or, just be careful of these things. None of that. All I could see was this was my get out of jail card and I was going to be free and I wasn't
Yeah.
going to have my aunt who was berating me every single day, getting me in
Yep.
trouble with my grandma. It was just such an awful environment from
Yeah.
age 3. I mean, those are my first memories.
Yeah.
My first memories are painful. I don't have any first memories that are like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. No, the first memories from 3 to 15 were difficult, traumatic, hard, awful, all
Yep.
those words.
Yeah.
And so all I could see were clouds and heaven, and I was going to have a new life and have parents and have new siblings. And oh my gosh, the US, I had never been. I was born and raised in, Ghana. Like at that point, I'd been to London once, I think, one time.
Yeah.
But I hadn't been anywhere else. So I was only excited.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost is like that yellow brick road where you're like, oh my
Hundred.
God, it is just incredible. I have a new life. Everything I've ever dreamed of, like, has opened up for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was all of that and more. It
Yeah.
wasn't until I arrived that I
Yeah.
realized, oh my God, I am in for another Cinderella story.
Yeah.
And that didn't take but a few days until I realized, oh my God, I am in a worse
Yeah.
situation than I was before.
I guess one of the
Oof.
things I want to ask is as somebody who went to school in Ghana and then coming to the US, like even just what was the differences like there? Because you went from having like knowing everybody
Oh
growing
my God,
up and
Janine.
having all these friends, like, oh my God,
Oh
at
my
15,
God.
like,
It was
no.
it was insane. And
Yeah.
if I hadn't been the Hanan that I described to you at the beginning of this conversation, I wouldn't have made it.
Yeah.
I First of all, I flew alone, unaccompanied minor.
Yeah.
So firstly, it was the longest flight I'd ever been on. I was scared to death. It was a nighttime flight. The turbulence was nuts. Thank God there was an older lady sitting beside me, like, calm down, it's okay, because I was freaking out. I'd never been on such a flight by myself.
Yeah.
And so then I arrive and still elated, excited, all the things. But my
Hmm.
very first night. Now, let me describe you the good things. So, my new parents had a nice big house, contrary to where I came from. I wouldn't say we were poor, but kind of. I mean, we had a decent home, but like, you know, one meal at dinner, no extras, no snacks, that kind of thing. Simple,
Yeah.
humble, borderline poor growing up. So
Hmm.
I was just it was like Cinderella, like, oh my gosh, it felt like a mansion. The house felt
Yep.
like a mansion to me. I had my own room for the first time. I used to sleep on a roll up like piece of foam. Me and my cousin slept on the floor on this foam like mattress from 3 to 15 with
Jeez.
both, let's see, with 3 other women. There was 5 of us in a room all of my life. So now I walk into this big house. I had my own room. I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? How am I going to decorate? I was so over the moon
Yeah.
the first few days. But going back to my first night, so had a great first day. Mind you, I'm jet lagged, exhausted.
Yeah.
So the way the house was set up, the upstairs was for the kids, and all the kids were out of the house at the time. It was just me. I just arrived. So the girls were all older than me, they're kids. So they were out of the house. I had just arrived and everything seemed kosher. That night, I have terrible jet lag. So it's like, I don't know, 11 or so at night. And I'm just like up watching TV. And I remember I had just taken off my sweater and I had on a sports bra and leggings. And I go to lay down on the floor on my belly and I'm watching TV and I'm like, gosh, I hope, trying to get tired to fall asleep. And I hear my uncle come up the stairs very quietly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God. In my gut, I knew that this was not good.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the only thing he did, which was still very awkward, he put his
Yeah.
foot on my back and just sort of like massaged my back with his foot
Mm.
and just sounded differently than he had sounded all day. And I
Yeah.
was, just felt weird. Even as a 15-year-old, I was so innocent. I'd never had a boyfriend. I was so innocent, 15 going on 5 in terms of like in experience with men.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know, but I knew that he was being inappropriate, the way he touched my back and how he sounded. And then he went back downstairs. But like that was day one. And that was very
Yeah.
traumatic. I was like, holy shit, what's going to happen in this house? So
Yeah.
that set the tone for, like, I tried not to be alone with him for the next few years. But that was the first thing. And then within a few days, his wife called me into the room and gave me a whole lecture about how I was dressed. Told me that my outfit was too tight, told me that I was, the way that my uncle and I were talking to each other was inappropriate. Mind you, I had just arrived and
Yeah.
I had one of those bodies. I was 12 going on like 18 with my body. I already had my boobs and my hips but
Yeah.
I mean, what I was wearing were hand-me-downs from my sister. I had no new clothes. Like,
Yeah.
she could have easily said, let's go shopping. You don't have, your clothes, right? Like the better conversation would have been, hey, let's go shopping, right?
Yeah.
Instead of giving me this whole lecture about dressing inappropriately in front of my uncle. Meanwhile, it was like, it was the 90s. We wore bodysuits, those tight
Yes.
shirts and leggings. And, that's what I wore. And like I said, they were
Yeah.
hand-me-downs from my sister. So it's not that I was trying to do anything. I was just being 15. And, so right away, I was uncomfortable right away because of what he did and because of what she said. And that set the
Yeah.
tone for like the rest of my time with them.
Yeah. Which I'm grateful wasn't too long, to be honest. Because,
Yeah,
like, him doing that day one was him testing his boundaries with you, basically. He was like, what can I push? And right away, you're like, what the shit? Like, he understood that you were in a position where you had no way out at that point in time. Like, there was
absolutely.
literally nothing you could do.
Nothing, had no money. No
Yeah.
one sent me with money. I came with nothing but one suitcase. And I actually was with them for 3 years. It was almost
Yeah.
3 years that I was with them. Not that long, but long enough to be fully
Yeah.
traumatized.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and
A
it was
week can fully traumatize
a
somebody,
week.
let alone
Yeah, oh,
three
yes.
years.
And the first week
Like,
was so traumatizing because I'm like,
yeah.
holy crap, what am I in for? What is
Yeah.
this going to be like? And now I don't have my siblings.
Yep.
At least in the previous home, we had each other. I could talk to my sister. But now it was just me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. I couldn't imagine having to go through that at home and then, yeah, going to a school and feeling out of place and everything too. Like, that just honestly
So
sucks.
awkward. Very, it
Yeah.
sucked big time. And like you said, school. So school initially was, I mean, of course, culture shock, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I came in 10th grade. So I didn't even have those, ninth grade friends that come to you, you go through high school with. I came in 10th
Yeah.
grade. My accent was a lot stronger. I used to have more of an English, British accent. And so
Mm.
they would make fun, more so, not so much make fun, but yeah, they would mimic me in class, and they would,
Yep.
say girl power, say water bottle, and the first couple times it was like, oh, girl power, but after like 100
Yeah.
times it was like, hey bro, can you shut up with that?
Yeah.
Um, so there was that kind of thing, but very quickly, because I'm the same Hanan that I described to you from the get, I made
Yeah.
friends right away. I went, I was in theater again, and school became my happy place. All my teachers loved
Good.
me. All my friends were great. So at least I had that.
Yeah.
At least I had that, regardless of what was going on at home.
Yeah. God. So you basically at that point, so you were only
Yeah.
there for 3 years. So after
Yeah.
the 3 years, what happened then?
So, so the 3 years came to an abrupt end. Okay. So firstly, my last year of senior high, that's
Yeah.
supposed to be like your best year of your life, right? Like
Yeah.
all my friends are driving. Most of them had their own car. And here I am, 18. My
Yeah.
parents haven't mentioned driving.
Yeah.
They haven't mentioned college. And they were execs. Like my dad, my uncle
Yeah.
was an exec of his company, and my aunt was a lawyer. I mean, they were big time folks.
Yeah.
Never mentioned college, never mentioned driving. So here I am living with them, you know, about to graduate, and there's no talk of where you going. So I had to do my own research, and now I've only been in the States a couple years, so doing my best to apply to schools. And those were the days where you had to reach out to the school and ask them to send you an application. And so I'd
Mm.
apply as best as I could. All my friends were doing it with their moms and filling out like 50 applications to get the school
Yeah.
they wanted, and none of that happened for me. I had to do all of that on my own and hope I was doing it right. And
Mhm.
so luckily I had great grades and I got into a few schools and I could pick. So that worked out okay. As soon as I turned 18, so I turned 18 in March. We
Mhm.
graduate, May or August, right? Um, right after my 18th birthday, my uncle's wife, for the first time, was gone for a whole weekend. Now, mind you, after he did that on first, day one for me, we were never alone. Like there was
Yeah.
always someone in that, one of his daughters or his wife. Like thankfully, there was
Yeah.
always someone else in the house.
Yeah.
But for the first time, his wife left for the whole weekend. And it was just him and I. And he came home from from dinner after work.
Mhm.
And I could tell he was drunk. And he made a move on me.
Yeah.
Was one of the scariest moments of my life. I had to fight him off, like fight him
Yeah.
off to where my pants were on the ground, and like that kind of a fight. But
Yeah.
luckily I was 18, I was a big girl, and I was like, I am not going to let you win. And
Yeah.
not to say I was stronger than him, because he was like 6'1" or 2" and big guy, 200
And
plus
when you're
pounds.
drinking, you have like super strength.
So
It's
much
insane.
strength. Yeah. I was a
Yeah.
little girl, 18, 5'3", 130 pounds, maybe, if that. And I think when he saw what he had done and my pants on the ground, he let me go and then
Yeah.
grabbed me again and tried again. Anyways, it was an awful fight. I
Yeah.
finally break free of him and I ran upstairs to my room, and I knew I had to leave the house because
Yeah.
his wife had been just like my aunt in Ghana had been to me. She had been that same way to me, just mean, wicked for 3 years. And so I knew that either she was going to continue to treat me this way, and now he was going to be mean to me because I turned down his advances.
Yeah.
And now I had this, fact on him. Until then, he was actually more of the saving grace. He was the
Mm.
smile in the day. He was nicer to me. Every now and then he'd give me $20 because they gave me no
Yeah.
allowance. they gave me, I was living in this nice house, but it was hell. And
Yeah.
so he was the positive, until he did that. And I knew, oh my gosh, now I have both of them that
That
are
was
against
part
me.
of the reason probably why she was so horrible and mean was because he was being nice to you.
Yes.
Like just right
And
away as yeah.
and
Well,
he
she
may have had a
probably sucked too,
history,
but yeah.
right? He may have had a
Yeah.
history with doing this because, years later I thought, why was she so awful to me? It makes sense that he had a history, and so she knew that he was gonna hit on me, and so
Yeah.
whatever, could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, they both turned on me, so I knew I had to leave the house. And I didn't want to go to college, have them be part of paying for it when all of this was going down. I just
Yeah.
wanted to break free of them. And
Of
so,
course.
yes. And so after he did that, that week, I called my friend Chris, who had one of my few friends who had a car, and I said, "Hey, after school, I need you to pick me up and take me to my best friend's house. They've accepted, they've agreed.
Mhm.
My best friend and her mom agreed to take me in." And he said, "Okay." And he met me after school. I had that same suitcase that I flew in 3 years prior, and
Yeah.
$20 because I had been cleaning houses with my best friend and her mom because my aunt and uncle gave me no money. My
Yeah.
aunt stopped buying my toiletries. She stopped buying groceries for snacks and stuff to take to lunch because they were barely home. They would go out all day for work and then go have dinner after work. So she stopped
Yeah.
buying stuff. And so I had to start making money. So I was cleaning houses on the weekend with my best friend and her mom, Mexican family that took
Mm.
me in. And I left that day, closed the door, never went back. And nor have
Yeah.
they ever been in contact with me since that day.
That's so interesting. Like, I was curious if you've had contact with them and stuff since, because I just, I'm a very curious person.
Yeah.
And it's like, I would love to know not their side of it, but what the hell was going through their brains at that time.
Yeah.
Like, to see that part of it and be
Hmm.
like, what would your excuse be? Like,
Right.
but honestly, they probably at this point see what they did as not being wrong. Like a lot of people, until they are willing to look at themselves, which sometimes is the hardest thing to see. Like you see yourself as the
Absolutely.
victim, not the attacker, a lot of the time.
Oh, and they totally saw. Well, I don't know about my uncle because he, like I said, he was cool with me for those 3 years, except for night one
Yeah.
and last night.
Yeah.
um, but my aunt, I know 100% she felt she was the victim. She felt,
Yeah.
like I had come and caused her pain and suffering. For what reason? I have no clue, but I know like family visited them after I left, and I heard they spent the whole trip bad mouthing me and what I had done and what I
Yeah.
had said. And mind you, I was a kid,
Yeah.
15 to 18. I was a child,
Yeah.
and so I heard it all. They felt they 100% were victims, but I'm sure that if they've seen my video, which I believe they have, now his wife hears what happened from my mouth, that her husband tried to do these things. Um,
Yeah.
and so whether, and I didn't even mention her in the movie or in the film. I didn't mention
Yeah.
her at all. I didn't mention how awful she was, how she made my
Yeah.
life hell, none of that.
Yeah.
Because none of that, shines any kind of light compared to what he did and why I eventually ran away from home.
Yeah, that was one thing I was curious about when I was watching the short film that's on your site and everything
Yeah.
about your story. I was curious. I was like, okay, I think you kind of mentioned that he had, like, you moved in with your aunt and uncle kind of thing. And then I was like, hey, well, what the hell was she doing this whole time? Like, as a woman watching another woman go through this, like, I just couldn't imagine what was going
She
through her
made,
head.
Janine, she made my life hell. And
Yeah.
I didn't even talk about her because at the end of the day, her husband did this, and that's why I left. And I wanted the
Yeah.
movie to be short and sweet, the film to be short and sweet. But she made she made
Yeah.
my time in Ghana with my aunt and grandma look like a cakewalk.
Yeah.
This woman was awful. Like I said, within days of me being there, how I dressed, how I looked, everything was wrong. I couldn't please her. She would have me do, and when I say Cinderella story,
Yeah.
it was 100% that.
Yeah.
Um, she lived in a nice big house. Like, if I would have to guess, I would say 2,000 square feet, probably the size of my house now. And
Yeah.
I did all the chores, even though her daughter that was um, like 8 months older than me. So when I got there, she was in 11th grade and I was in 10th. So she
Mm.
soon, she left a year before me. But she was gone a lot because she was a normal high school student. She got to do all the things. She got to go places with her friends. I was a bad girl all the time. Mind
Yeah.
you, I never went anywhere. I never got to do anything. I will never forget homecoming. I went and asked my aunt if I could go. There was a fee I had to pay. Could I go? She threw a huge fit, told me no, but then her daughter got to go. This kind of Cinderella stuff where the stepsister is what it felt like. Didn't get
Yeah.
to do all these things, but then her kid did. And like I said, I wasn't asking for much. Driving, their daughter had her own car. She drove their old beat up like 89 um, Honda. That's how she drove her work herself to school. She got to do all the senior things. I taught
Yeah.
myself to drive.
Yeah.
I taught myself to drive. So it was she made my life hell. I remember her telling me to scrub the kitchen floor with the dish sponge, and her kitchen was huge. I mean, nice big,
Yeah.
big house kitchen, and I washed the floor with that. So I don't mention those things because I don't want to look like I'm picky. I would have had no problem doing the chores. At the end of the day, they did me a great service by bringing me to the States. And this is what I struggled with for years. Like I felt like
Yeah.
I needed to be grateful because they
Yep.
brought me to the States. They gave me the citizenship, they adopted me, and that really changed my life, right? I wouldn't be here if not for that. But that didn't give them carte blanche to treat me any way they wanted. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah. If there was anything that you would want to say to them now, what would it be?
Shame on you.
Yeah.
Shame on you. They know exactly what they did. They know
Yeah.
exactly what and I don't have to defend myself. When you're
Mhm.
honest, when you're being honest and you're saying the truth, I don't have to defend. I don't have to say, why did you? I know why she
Yeah.
treated me that way. It was that awful toxic. She was jealous for whatever reasons were in her head. And I was
Yeah.
a beautiful, vibrant, big old smile 15-year-old. I had big old
Yeah.
boobs. I tried to cover them. It wasn't my fault that I was made this way. It's not my
Mhm.
fault that your husband's a pedo and looking at me that way. I was dressed in
Yeah.
hand-me-downs from Ghana. But
Yeah.
I was this vivacious. I've always been this way, and I wasn't. I was shunned and treated like crap because of it. And
Yeah.
so all I wanted was parents and a new start and a new life. And I tried my best to be kind and thoughtful and pick up after myself and do all the things that I had done at my grandma's place, which was very strict.
Yes.
And and no matter what I did, she was on me constantly. I mean, I can't put it another way other than Cinderella. It was constant.
Yeah.
And then my uncle, he did his thing. So yeah, that is all I would ever say to them. I have no desire. I've made
Yeah.
my peace. I have no desire to ever speak to them.
Yeah.
The day that I ran away, my aunt was a lawyer, and I think she knew she had to call to make sure I was where I said I was going to be. Because I wrote them a note. I actually sent them. I technically
Yeah.
didn't run away. I actually wrote a letter saying, I'm going to be at my best friend's house at this address. I appreciate you for everything you've done. Thank you for everything, but I know this hasn't worked out. I never actually talked about my uncle and what he did until years
Yeah.
later, and they heard it through the grapevine. But um, yeah, I have no desire to ever talk to them. I also called one of their daughters, who was a woman, when I was,
Mm.
leaving the house, and I told her, this is what your dad did, and I'm leaving the house this week. And her response to me, She actually laughed. And then she said, I think my mother will be relieved. I swear to God, that's what she said. And so I think she laughed out of being uncomfortable. She didn't know how to respond that her dad, who was looked at as
Yeah.
such a great man, he had come to the States, he had self educated, he had made success for himself. I thought he was an amazing man,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so did many people. And so I think she laughed not because she was trying to be a bitch, but because I think she was shocked and didn't know how to respond, and laughed out of being uncomfortable, didn't know how to respond to me. Because at that time, her dad was like a god.
Yeah.
Everybody saw him as like a god. And that's why I kept my story just like so many women do for so
Yep.
many years, until you either have the bravery to step up and speak up like I have, or
Yep.
you realize, what, it's really traumatic to relive it. I'll keep it to myself. And I know a lot of women do that.
Yeah. And so I was diagnosed with PTSD years ago from an incident, and I ended up having to go away to a place, and they did all of these like psychology and trying to get you better and all that fun stuff.
Hmm.
And it was really interesting in the group therapy sessions and stuff like that they had. One of the rules in there was like we were all willing to like work on some of the struggles you're going through now. But a big part was if you were going to be sharing your traumatic story and diving into that, it has a habit of re-triggering people. So always ask permission. And like even when we were doing one-on-ones and stuff and getting to know the other people in the program, asking permission. And it's like you can still help each other without diving into your story, because sometimes that can trigger somebody else. And so
Right.
it's like assault without permission sometimes, where it's like you're not
Yeah.
expecting it.
Mhm.
So it was interesting because I find that with a lot of stuff, it's finding that balance between sharing and being open with the stories and stuff, without diving too far into the trauma of the detail.
Yes.
And it's fine, it's a fine line sometimes. And I find that sometimes people are kind of overly sensitive sometimes with things where they're like, you shouldn't talk about this at all because it can upset someone. And it's like, well, that's the point, is it's upsetting and we need to speak about it, and it's a problem.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
if I went, imagine me having to go through it versus just say it. If you think it's painful,
Yeah.
I've said that to a few people in my
Yeah.
family who were like, "Well, how can you share that? And how can you say that?" And I say to them, "Imagine living it, baby girl. Imagine living
Yeah.
it. If I lived
Yeah.
it and I went through it and I, am traumatized from it, at least I can share it and help others. And this
Yeah.
to me is therapeutic. I mean,
Yes.
luckily for me, it's therapeutic for me. Um,
Yeah.
and so even when I'm triggered, to me, I accept the feelings, I take them in, I do what I have to with them, and then I let it go. And that's part of why I think I've healed so well,
Yeah.
is because I haven't been afraid to, really dig into, all of that, which caused me so much pain. So now I will
Yeah.
say that I was fortunate. Had he successfully raped me, that would be a whole
Yeah.
different, story.
Yeah.
Perhaps I wouldn't even want to talk about, so I was fortunate that I was able to, successfully fight him off, and it ended there. Very traumatic, but not as, I hate to use the term, but for lack of a better term, not as severe had he been successful, so much
Yeah.
respect to those who don't want to talk about theirs. If it's,
Of course.
I understand that to each their own, but for me, gosh, I wish someone had prepped me for any of these things that happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gone through many different types of trauma over the years, and I've tried to make a point of being able to help people with my trauma instead of it being such a bad thing, even though some of it was horrible. It's being able to use those things. So I do like Reiki and crystal healing and stuff like that.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
find a lot of the people that come to me have a lot of grief, anxiety, and trauma because I know how to go through it. And so I'm able to like energetically tap into it a little bit more than somebody who doesn't understand that feeling. Like I know where and how it's held in the body. And it's like as soon as, even if
Mm,
someone's like, oh no, I'm totally fine this week and everything, and I get in, then I'm like, okay, but I can feel this in this one spot. And I'm like,
yes.
are you like grieving something right now? Like, what is happening? And they're like, oh, yeah, I've been kind of going through this and this. I'm like, see, I'm like, I can feel it. I'm like, I
Yes.
know it's stuck in there. And it's like, it doesn't need to be anymore. It's okay.
It's okay for it to come out. Release.
Yeah.
Release is the best
Yeah.
you can do. I've heard great things about Reiki. That's cool that you do it.
It was, yeah, it was one of the most amazing things for me when dealing with PTSD. I was in such a dark place in my life, and I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore, and I had like no hope in coming back at that point. And everybody had given up on me, like all the doctors and
Mhm.
everything. They're like, this is permanent, this is you now. And I'm like, but I can't live like this. Like I can't. And when I got my first session of Reiki, it was like it cleared so much of the built up trauma that was stuck, and it allowed me to like work with the energy and release it so much easier. It like took that edge
Mm.
off. And so without it, like I don't know where I'd be right now, like to be
Wow.
honest.
Incredible.
Yeah,
I'll have to check it out.
it was amazing. And some people it works really well with. Some people it just, I find if I'm going through like a massive grief or something like that, you know, when
Yeah.
you're so far into grieving that you're like, I almost can't cry at this point. I feel like if I
Oh,
start
yes.
to let it out, it's going to take over my whole life.
Yeah.
It kind of gets that edge off of it sometimes so that I
Mhm.
can dive into grief or trauma or anything like that without feeling like I'm going to get stuck in it forever.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'll have
Yeah.
to dig into some Reiki. That's amazing to hear that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I love energy work because literally that's what we are, and it's shown that like
Absolutely.
trauma and all of this is like held in your body, and it's like, well, that's energetic. That's not a physical
So
thing.
true. That's so true.
Yeah.
But also, if you hadn't had the will, you wanted to
Yeah.
get out of that dark place and you wanted to change and you wanted to do and
Yeah.
you wanted to be better. And I
Yep.
believe that's my whole thing. One of my mantras is self-belief is the most crucial tool we hold.
Yep.
Because if I didn't self-believe, I wouldn't be here today. And I think that
Yep.
in your story, I'm sure Reiki helped you exponentially, but had
Yep.
you not made that first step because you wanted to
Yep.
be better and do better, it would have never happened. So that's amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, as somebody who like I didn't grow up with structured religion ever. And
Mm,
sometimes I kind of wish I did a little bit because, like, growing up for a really long time, the only person I could have faith in was myself. And back then, that was kind of hard to deal with.
mm,
Now it's like I have that strength where it's like I know I can get myself out of this because I've been through worse. Um, and
yes.
even, yeah, last year was honestly some of the most grief I've ever had to go through. So that was like a
Mm,
really bad
I'm
year,
so sorry.
which we'll dive into a little bit later for sure.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to get back to you basically were going to college, and I know you went to college to become a nurse. Like, what on earth made you want to be a nurse of all things?
Yeah. So, okay. So after I ran away, so I was in Houston when I ran away, where I lived and when I ran away. Stayed with my best friend, her mom, for a few months. I was supposed to go to University of Houston. I actually checked in, did all my own paperwork, and
Mhm.
I'll never forget going to the administrator's office, doing my paperwork, and she says, asked me some questions, and then she said, "Are you a ward of the court?" And that was the first time I said yes, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Oh,
Anyways, that was a moment I'll never forget.
yeah.
But see, for me, I can just talk about it, cry, and keep it moving like that. That's how I've made it, honestly, Janine. I don't think I would have
Same.
if I wasn't this open, right? Like you just say it,
Like the
cry a
tears will
little,
come down. I'll keep talking.
yeah,
It's
and
fine.
keep it
I'm
moving.
used to it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So okay, so I went to check in, did my paperwork, was supposed to start in a month or two, and then I had some cousins in LA who reached out and were like, "Hey, we hear this and this has happened. You left your uncles. Come see us." And I was supposed to just go visit for the summer, but I fell in love with Ventura, California. Ended up living there for like 5 years. So I was now living with my cousins. I took my first year off. I was supposed to save money, but of course that didn't happen because we were all young, four of us
Yes.
cousins living together, having to pay bills, and I was working at Denny's. And next thing you know, I had debt. And so I
Yep.
should not have taken my cousin's advice. I should have just gone to college. But he convinced me to take this year off and that I could save all my money and I wouldn't have to pay bills and I could just buy groceries. And next thing you know, I was paying the rent, helping us from getting evicted, all of this stuff. And so that
Yeah.
that was the first time I ever had debt. So I was off for a year, had some crazy jobs, sold door to door. Oh my gosh. Um, some insane experiences in that 1 year. And then I went to college for communications. I wanted to be a
Mm,
communications major because it was the closest thing I could think of to acting, is what I thought. I knew I couldn't be an
yep.
actress. I had tried it, but you got to have money and support to try and be an actress. You can't be,
We didn't have
the way
YouTube
I
back then.
right. And to yeah, so there was no way. I tried for a little bit, but then they were like, we need 2 grand for headshots. I was like, okay, well, I'm out of
No.
luck. That's where my journey ends. So I started with communications, then I changed to psych. And I had heard from everyone that if you go into psych, you need a master's to get a decent job. And I'm like, I need to start feeding myself in four
Yeah.
years max. Like I need a plan. So for
Yeah.
me, I don't want to say I had no choice, but I knew that I had to have a piece of paper in my hand in a few years
Yep.
max. Otherwise, I was going to continue to be struggling with my cousins for till God knows how long. So I did change my major a few times. I went into nursing because I took my first anatomy class just to try it out to see what was up in the healthcare field. And
Hmm.
there was a head and neck surgeon teaching that class, and he made me fall in love with anatomy and physiology. And after
Mm.
that, that's when the nursing shortage and nurses being in demand, this was like '04,
Mm.
was happening, and I was like, you know what, maybe I could try nursing. Like I really love A&P, I love anatomy and physiology. So by then I already had like 2 years under my belt of school, so a lot of it, I not that I lost, but they weren't transferable credits. So I didn't end up finishing nursing school until I was 26, because of all the changes. But yeah, that's kind of what happened. That's like the summary of what got me into nursing school.
It's funny. I find anatomy so intriguing. And like even when I was doing like a yoga study and stuff, and they were going through like all of the muscles and the bones and all that, I find it so interesting.
Yes.
But also he was like he's like, okay, like push here and feel under here and push. And I was like, ugh, nope.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm good seeing it on a picture. But as soon as I start like feeling it in me, I was like, no, 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 I'm
No,
going to
thank
puke.
you.
Like,
Yeah, but see, it was the opposite for me, and I get that. Most of my family said the same thing. Like, how do you even
yeah.
do it? But like, I loved touching. I loved seeing. We had a real cadaver. My professor brought in a real
Mm,
human cadaver for our A&P class, which is unheard of. And it was so
Yeah.
amazing. We had like an 80-year-old woman's body to not dissect. It was already dissected,
Yeah.
if you will. And we just got to go in there and, touch and feel and stuff. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. And so,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's really cool. Like even over the last few years, so I've had a interesting journey with like fertility and pregnancy and all that. So I've learned a lot about the woman's body in the last few years. And like I was saying, last year was super traumatic. So I had 2 ruptured ectopic pregnancies last year
I'm
and
so
lost
sorry to hear
both of
that.
my tubes. Yeah.
You
So
lost
I
both of your
learned,
tubes? Oh
yeah,
my
yeah.
goodness. So sorry.
So it was after the first rupture last March, asking doctors questions and they couldn't give me basic answers about, I was like, okay, so if I have one tube, like how, I'm like, does that, do I only ovulate like every once in a while? How does this work? How does this work? And they couldn't give me answers. So it's me. I dive into research of everything. I was like, okay, so this
Yeah.
sends signals here, and this, like, an egg can come across from the other side and go into the tube this way. And like, I dove really far into it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well,
Um,
yeah, it's your own body, it's your life. You have to.
but it amazed me how many healthcare practitioners couldn't give me basic anatomy for women questions.
Hmm.
And I was like, how is this a thing? Like, I want to know, like, how my tubes work. How is it that an egg can travel across and into the other tube from the other side? Like, in my mind, that your ovaries were always attached to the tubes, and it's like, no, it's not. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, it's
Right,
just
one can
basic
move.
things.
You would think
Yeah.
that after one ectopic, I guess did they offer you any like IUI or any other options?
They basically, with it, when I had the first surgery, they said that my other tube looked okay. And to like wait a couple months before trying again. And that you have a higher percent chance of getting pregnant that year following the ectopic, but you also have a way higher percent chance of it being another ectopic.
Hmm.
So their solution to that was an earlier scan. And I was supposed to get the scan on a Friday, and on the day before I was supposed to get the scan, I went to the hospital because I'm like, this is another ectopic. I
You
could
knew
feel it.
right
And
away.
that was at 6 weeks. I knew the feeling. And as soon as she went to do the ultrasound, I
She
had the
felt it.
exact same feeling, the exact same pains. And I'm like, it's the other one got to 10 and a half weeks before, and I ruptured in the hospital. This one only got to about 6 before I was like, I know something's wrong again. So they tried to do the medical route this time, which they didn't tell me um, until I agreed to it, that it was, we did the methotrexate. So it's like chemotherapy drugs, which
Hmm.
they don't tell you. They're like, oh, it's methotrexate. I'm like, okay, awesome, cool. I'm thinking it's a pill that I pop,
Right.
not multiple syringes of chemotherapy pumped into my body. Like, okay.
Yeah.
So then that didn't work. So I had blood work the following Sunday. And then by the Tuesday, I was rushed into the hospital again because it had fully ruptured again. So there was like, I had internal bleeding and all of it again.
Why
And
didn't
it
they
was
just do
like,
surgery when they saw it?
because they were saying that there was a chance of being able to save the tube by doing the medicated route.
Oh.
I now look at it and think that I probably may have been able to save the tube if we went in and removed it, but they didn't really give me that option. Like they didn't explain the options
Mhm.
properly to me.
It was kind of just you were going this route and that was it.
Y- Yeah, it was kind of either we remove the tube or end the pregnancy or we do the medicated route. And they didn't really talk about removing just the pregnancy. Like it was really weird. It was like they were trying to save me from going through another surgery right away.
Yeah,
But yeah, that was just the whole thing just sucked.
I'm
Like,
sure. How
yeah.
traumatic, my goodness.
Yeah. So that was massive last year. So it
Yeah.
was like learning so much about women's health and anatomy and birthing processes all over the place. Like I still like now I can't physically get pregnant without intervention. But I do still technically have my ovaries. So I could
You have ovaries, you
do
have a
intervention.
uterus, you have everything but the
Yeah.
tubes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of just at this point I'm like I just need a little break.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like
Yeah.
mentally I need a break.
100%.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's okay. And that's okay. Break for
Yeah.
you. Yeah. That's a lot to go
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, and I know that part of your story like you actually had a more traumatic birth with your son, I think it was.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
so my first son, Ramsey, I was in midwifery school. I
Mhm.
was while I was pregnant, and I actually got pregnant easily, very fast. Didn't think it would happen. I had PCOS, so I thought it would. My doctor had told
Mm.
me it might be years
Yeah.
if you can get pregnant. So as soon as I got married, I was like, well, let's go because it might be years, you know. And
Yes.
so I got pregnant right away, and
Mhm.
like on my honeymoon, and then like I said, I was in midwifery school, so I was learning all the things I wanted. A I thought I wanted a water birth, like, you know, all of the natural stuff that you can imagine I was going to have.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
of course, because I wanted all those things and had all those things planned in my head, Murphy's Law,
Yeah.
I end up having him at 7 months, emergency
Mm.
C-section, almost died, 10 weeks of NICU, the whole nine. I was actually taking finals in my postpartum room for midwifery.
Jeez.
And soon after that, I hung up my hat with midwifery and I said, you know what, I'm done. I changed
Yeah.
paths, but I had done a whole year of midwifery school for my master's. And yes, I had Ramsey, top, I would say, scariest day of my life. So
Yeah.
around 24 weeks, I went in for a scan, and at the hospital that I worked at, they sent me, I just went downstairs and my doc scanned me and he was like, you know what? I think you're going to have some high blood pressure. And
Mm.
I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I think it's coming. You might want to, you know, come back in a couple weeks. We'll do some steroid shots. And I was like, what? My blood pressure is fine. I was so confused. And like you, I
Yeah.
started researching and like looking into what was he talking about. I think because I'm a
Yeah.
nurse, he thought I knew everything, but I did not know that you
No.
can check the blood pressure between the mother and the baby. In the vessels between the mother and the baby, you can look at the blood pressure of those vessels and you can
Crazy.
tell that the blood pressure, yes, that the mother is going to have preeclampsia. And so from 24 weeks, he noted that. And I came back, he had me come back around 26 or 27 weeks. And I got my steroid shots for his lungs, the baby's lungs. And by this point, I'm still confused. My blood pressure is fine. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I feel fine, had no symptoms.
Yeah.
So around 28 weeks, so I get my shot and then I get another scan and he's like, yeah, it's getting worse. You should probably go, not bed rest, but no more working for you. Cause I was on the floor still. And, you
Yeah.
know, you work like really hard when you're on the hospital floor, right? So
Yep.
he's like, no more work for you. Just go ahead and take off, but no need for bed rest. So my first day at home, I was chilling on the couch and I hadn't felt him move. Now, mind you, he was a very quiet baby because I had what's called an anterior placenta, where the placenta is between you and the baby. So it's like some cushion there. The placenta
Yeah.
is quite fat, right? And, so
Yeah.
it was in between him and I. So he was already a quiet baby because of that. And so
Yeah.
he wasn't like the typical boom 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 in your ribs type of baby. So
Yeah.
it wasn't just, unheard of to have not felt him most of the morning. But by late morning, I'm like, I really can't feel him. So I start to do all my midwifery tricks. I did some yoga moves. I had some
Yeah.
chocolate to see if I could get him to wake up. Nothing worked.
Yeah.
So I text my husband, hey, I'm going in. Something doesn't feel right. And he laughed at me. He was like, oh, baby, they've scared you. The doctor has scared you. Everything is fine. And I
You
wanted
feel
to,
it in your bones.
you feel
Like
it
you're
in
like
your bones.
something's wrong.
Something's wrong.
And it's like it's a difference between that like panic of yeah, the difference between the panic of anxiety and the panic of I know something's wrong. Like when the doctor told me the first one was ectopic, I looked him dead in the eye. I'm like, I knew it. And he's like, how did you know? I'm like, I could feel it. Like,
100%. We just know a mother
yeah,
knows. A mother knows. And from that
yeah,
day on, I'll never second guess my gut feeling, that intuition that you get,
yeah.
because I knew something was wrong. So I'm calling the hospital, calling my doc who was on call. And as
Mhm.
I'm calling her, I'm already driving to the hospital. And she says, oh, you have the anterior placenta. It's probably fine. She was another doctor on call for my doctor. So she kind of
Yeah,
laughed at, like, also sniggered, just like my husband had. Like, first time mom. I knew she's thinking first time mom,
yeah,
everything is inflated and inflamed in your mind. Your baby's going to die, from day one. You're always scared of everything. And so I know that's
yep,
what she thought, but I knew something wasn't right. So she's like, well, go ahead and
yeah,
come in. We'll check you out. I was like, oh, I'm already driving. So I get to the hospital. A couple of the girls there knew me in labor and delivery because I was on the postpartum floor, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Nan, what you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I haven't felt the baby, so doc told me to come in and get checked out." She
yeah,
also was like, oh, "Don't even put on the gown. Just I'll check vitals. Maybe you need some fluids." I was like, "I've been home all day. I don't need fluids. I've been drinking water all day."
yeah,
But anyways, let's go. So she checks my
yeah.
blood pressure, and for the first time, it was like 155 over 110 or something like that. And I was like,
Jeez.
oh my gosh, the doctor at 24 weeks was 100% right.
Yeah,
So she's like, yeah, okay, go ahead and put the gown on. We'll check you. We'll just do a few more blood pressure checks and we'll see what the doctor wants.
yeah,
So she puts on the cuff on me. I have the gown on, and I'm just in this little back room for triage. It's not a real room because she thought I was going to be in and out, you know?
yeah,
So so the cuff's going off like every 15 minutes and the blood pressure is just rising, rising, rising. So then my doctor comes in and she's like, hey, your blood pressure is kind of high. We need three things to happen before we take a baby this early. Your
yeah,
blood pressure, she said, the blood pressure high, which you have, protein in the urine, which you don't have, and then the baby telling us that he's not right, he's not good. So there's a doctor, but it's Saturday. There's a doctor who can come in and do a scan, but he's at home. So I'm going to call him because he has to come and check the Dopplers, which is what that doctor had checked weeks ago. And
yeah,
so I said, okay, sure, no problem. So I'm still alone in this back room. I've texted my husband, like, this is not looking good. I'm not sure where this is headed, da da da. He's working. And so then the doctor arrives and he says, I'm going to give your baby chance to wow me or to tell me that he doesn't need to come today.
yeah.
And he starts and he goes for, I don't know, 20 minutes. He's checking the baby, nothing, no movement. Then he does the VAS, the vasoacoustic stimulation, which is like a buzzer on your
Mhm.
belly that's supposed to
Oh,
wake the
jeez.
baby up. It's supposed to be the equivalent of standing under a jet as as a human outside of the uterus.
Yeah,
And Ramsey barely just tick, barely. And so I said, is this a good time to call my husband? He said, oh, yes.
Yeah.
And from that moment, within 15 minutes, I was shaved, prepped, and in the OR
Yeah.
with the whole team ready to.
They move really quick
They
when they
move
need to.
really quickly.
Yeah.
Within minutes, I was in the
Yeah.
OR and they had given me the epidural, and your epidural in your back, it works. It comes this way, comes down this way. So if they give it to you and it's fast, you feel like you can't breathe. Most women, a lot of women who get the epidural, it takes a minute to catch your breath because you feel you can't breathe because it sort of hits your diaphragm and lungs. And so when they give it to you fast, it's even worse. And so I'm like, with the anxiety and with the epidural, I can't catch my breath. And it was
Yeah.
the scariest moment of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing the spot check. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel? Can you feel? Because they're ready to cut and get him out stat, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can feel it. I can feel it. Please don't
Yeah.
cut me. I was
Yes.
like screaming. I can.
You're like, I wish I didn't feel it. Trust
Yes.
me. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
And within, like, right before they cut, my husband runs in. They have him all gowned up. All I can see is his eyes. Imagine, like, I'm alone, right? Now, before he arrives, I was freaking out. They had to give me, I think, Valium. I heard the nurse anesthetist who was at my head. She's like,
Yeah.
she yells, give her some Valium. She needs to calm down. And so they gave me Valium. All of the things they said, nothing comforted me until she put her hands on my face and she says, I see you, you're okay. And that was
Yeah.
finally where I felt like some human connection, because I was praying. I was speaking to my mom. I'm like, Mommy, we're coming home to you. My son is dead
Yeah.
and I'm about to die. Like, I was praying
Yeah.
in the OR and like the nurse was tearing up. She's like, it's okay. You're okay. You're all right. But I really believed my son was dead. And I thought
Yeah.
I was about to die too, but I knew for sure he was gone. And
Yeah.
so she put her hands on me and I finally relaxed and breathed a little. And that's when my husband, joined us and they cut. And the cut was fine, but them pulling him out, if you've ever seen
Yeah.
Braveheart where they pull his guts out, that's what it felt
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Felt like my soul was ripping out of my body because yes, the skin was numb, but the rest didn't take yet.
Yeah.
And so that was awful. And so they pull him out and you didn't hear a peep in the OR. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've lost my son. And all I heard the nurse say was 20:00, 8 o'clock. So I knew he was delivered. So my husband's looking at me eye to eye. He's afraid to even look at the baby because we're not sure what to expect.
Yeah.
But then finally they say, Dad, do you want to go see your son? And we realized he was alive. The NICU team had come, done their thing, intubated him, and
Good.
taken him to the NICU. Scariest day of my life, girl.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like, I think what's hard too is it's the hospital you work. It's the people that you know. And so it's, even though I know that doctors and nurses care for their patients, it's different when they know you. And so you could
Yes.
feel the energy of all of them and their anxiety in the room because they're like, oh my God, like, because you're such an amazing person. And so it's just every time somebody's like, I don't want this to happen to anyone, let alone you. And
Because they knew me and they
yeah,
knew I was a nurse on their, like the few that
yeah,
didn't know me knew I was a nurse in the hospital. So I'm sure that was even
yeah,
more pressure for them, right?
of
It
course.
was a lot of pressure for me and my baby
Like,
that day. It was, oh my gosh, so traumatizing. I still to this day have white coat syndrome. If anyone's gonna check my blood pressure right away, I have to like tell myself it's okay. No one's dying.
oh,
It's blood pressure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like there's so many things that it's like, yeah, you just automatically are triggered through things. And yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
I know. My doctor is very gentle with me now. Like, she knows. She's like, okay, like, I need to put my hand on your stomach. Are you okay? I'm like, yes, I'm okay. Thank you for checking.
Yeah.
Like,
Aw,
be
love that.
gentle. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very, very scary experience. Oh my goodness. And that followed with 10 weeks of NICU, roller coaster ride. One day he's better, one day
Yeah.
he's regressed 2 days worth, up and down. You think he's coming home, but oh no, actually he needs this. It was such an experience that I had to grieve the loss of my pregnancy. I didn't get to be big. I
Yep.
didn't get to, all my friends were, I'm 41, so my son's turning 13 in a week, Ramsey, my preemie.
Yeah.
Um, but when I was having him, all my friends were having babies because we're all, late 20s or so. And so everybody was having kids, and they were having, everybody that I was
Yeah.
friends with at that time was having vaginal deliveries, big old 8, 9 pounders. And here I am with my
Yep.
2 pounds, 6 ounce baby in the NICU,
Yeah.
perpetually doesn't want to come home, you know? And
Yeah.
so I had to grieve all of that. It was a big loss. But it wasn't until here's when God slapped me in the face, the universe and God, either or. Um,
Yeah.
this beautiful experience, very painful but very awakening moment, where in the NICU they have pods where the very sick kids, like my boy was
Yeah.
in critical, right, and then they go up as you get healthier. And so
Mm.
or they change pods as they get healthier. So my kid was with all the critical kids in the first pod, and there was this gorgeous baby, looked like Indian mixed baby with the long lashes, gorgeous girl. She was full term, and I saw her all the time with her family holding her, but she was in the critical ward, and all she had was nasal cannula, a little oxygen, that was it. And they're holding her all the time, and she was beautiful. But of course, I'm in my own grief. I was bad about getting help. I didn't talk to parents. I was just so upset. Like, why me, God? Why? Like, my traumatic
Yeah.
life wasn't enough, that I had to have this experience too, right? So I was going through all of those
Yes.
feelings. And so I
Yeah,
didn't
you
talk to
you
anyone.
hate the universe
Yes,
at that point. You're
yes,
like, "What? Have I not done enough?
enough.
Like, why?"
Yes,
I literally I looked at my husband at one point and I was like, "Was I Hitler in a past life? Like, what the fuck did I do to
yes.
deserve
Oh
this
my gosh,
shit?"
I have had those
Yeah.
questions, like, who was I
Yes.
in previous
Who
lives?
what
Because,
did I do?
man, what did I do to deserve this? Like,
Yep.
even a full term baby I couldn't have, and so
Yes.
I went through all of that until
Yeah.
we moved from the critical pod to our second level. Now we're like, he's a good boy and he's eating and almost breathing on his own.
Yeah.
And I was in the elevator to go up to see him, and I saw one of the women who had been holding this beautiful baby in that critical pod. And I said, "Hey, how's the baby doing? I haven't seen you in a while." And she said, "Oh, she died. She died
Mm.
2 days ago." She said, "We knew she wasn't going to make it. She had some kind of accident in utero. And we knew that she wouldn't make it past a few hours, but she ended up living, a week or two, however long that was." And I thought, oh my God,
Yeah.
like, how can I complain? How can I feel, it made me feel like I had to just accept all that I had been through and move forward. At least my boy was going to come home with me. At least he was
Yeah.
born with everything he needed, and he just needed some time to get over all these hurdles, but he was going to get over them, and he was going to come home with me, and he did. And here's this woman who
Yeah.
lost her baby, beautiful full-term baby, that never got to go home. And from that moment, I changed my perspective and was thankful and grateful that I got to bring my boy home, regardless of the issues
Yeah.
that we faced. And I 100% believe it made me a better nurse, a better mom.
Yep.
I After that I became a NICU nurse. I mean, it taught me a lot, taught me exponentially, like, changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most traumatic events do.
Do. Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it's any time I've gone through bigger traumas, like you have your littler traumas and you have your big traumas. They
Yes.
skyrocket you into the person that you're supposed to be. And
Absolutely.
it's like, being like, I've been very open about what happened to me and my story since it happened. I never hid it, even at the beginning. And it was something that every time I talk to anybody, they're like, oh, ectopic pregnancies are really uncommon and they're really rare and all this kind of stuff. And then every time I was open about it, every single woman would come to me and share their story about an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage. And they're like, I haven't told anybody about this. And I was like, this is insane. Like, why, again, like, why do we feel that we have to almost be ashamed of these things? And
Right.
it's like, yeah,
It
giving
only
people
helps.
space to,
It only helps to
yeah,
share your story, right? It only helps to say what you've been through to help the person behind you. And I think that, like you said, the traumatic experiences propel you, or
yeah,
you succumb to them. You're either going to
yep,
succumb to it, or you're going to use it,
yes,
right? And
yep,
you're going to weave it into the tapestry of Janine, and you're
yeah,
going to make you better, bigger, stronger, smarter than ever before. But
yes,
not everybody can do that. And
yeah.
you know and I often liken this, which I just described, to like those NASCAR races, those f- ones where they just go round and round and round and
Yes.
round, right? It's like that. You go in forever, right? Just going, 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 going. But when and if you make that bend, if you can be
Yeah.
strong enough and will yourself enough and push yourself enough to make it to the finish, you will win 100% every time.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to get to that bend and so hard to get to the
Yes.
end, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's finding hope in those darkest times is one of the
Yes,
hardest things. Like,
absolutely.
when, yeah, it's like you'll be in, yeah, it's not just a woe is me phase. It's like you literally give up on everything and everybody at some points. And it's like you can't remember feeling any good ever at that point. It's like no good
Absolutely.
memories can help pull you out of it. You're like, no,
Yes. Suddenly you're
this has
like,
always
I've
felt
never had good memories.
yes. You're like, I've
Very
never
true.
gone through anything good in my whole life. It's all been horrible. Yes.
So true. But
Yeah.
I call that my 9 out of 10 days. Nine out of
Yeah.
10 days, I know that I'm smarter from all my trauma. I know that
Yep.
I'm a better friend, better mom, better
Yep.
nurse, better leader, all of the things because of all the things I went through.
Yeah.
1 out of 10 of those days, I wish they all hadn't happened and I was a stupid, spoiled brat living with my mom in a shack. You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And that's okay. The one
Yes.
out of 10 days, I do exactly what you just described, where
Yep.
it just hits me where I'm like, why me?
Yeah.
Why this life? Couldn't I have just been a stupid, go lucky, you know, pretty girl with spoiled brat that my parents spoiled to death and had none of this
Yes.
wisdom and none of this knowledge and just been a shitty friend maybe, but hey, I would have my mother.
Yep.
And so I get it 100%. I get it.
Yep.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's, could
it's
you
tough.
imagine your life without any trauma? Like, oh my God. I don't know who I would be in any way. Like, oh,
Right. And if you think about it, the greatest things happen under pressure. I mean, look at birth. If you've ever witnessed a baby
yes.
being born vaginally, it is a
Yeah.
very traumatic experience. The baby's head comes out and is squished right here by the vagina and it's blue and mind you, coming through the vaginal canal, the contractions, like the baby is sore when they're born. I mean, when I used to
Yes.
when I used to be on the admission team and bathing babies and doing their first exam,
Hmm.
they're tender to touch because they're
Yeah.
sore. they've been through all these contractions and then through the vaginal canal, and then they have to take that first breath and scream and cry, and it's a very painful thing. That's just the baby. But that's how we
Yep.
come into this life. Look at diamonds. They're only made under pressure. So
Yeah.
yes, on my 9 out of 10 days, I can think all these things. And then my 1 out of 10, I'm like, why the fuck did this happen to me?
I know. I know. And I'm like, I know that I can use all of my experiences and my trauma and all
Yes,
of this to help other people. And I
yes,
love to be able to help other people. But
yes.
sometimes I'm like, could I just read it in a damn book instead
Right.
of having to live it this
Yes.
time?
Could I have
Like,
kept one of my
please.
tubes? I could have still helped other people,
Yes.
right? Yes, yes.
Right? That
100%.
was, yeah, that was the biggest thing with the second time was like, I lost all hope in anything and everybody. Like, I have found a lot of my spirituality over the last few years and stuff. And for me to just like look at the universe and be like, what the fuck? Like, I have given everything to be able to
Everything.
help people all the time. And you couldn't give me this one little fuck. We couldn't have just done it once.
One time,
We couldn't have
I had
just done
to
it
lose
one time
both.
or, right?
Right. And if you
Like,
hadn't been in, and if you hadn't had access to modern medicine, you would have died.
yeah.
You would
Yes.
have hemorrhaged and died.
And yeah, even there were multiple times, like I explained to my husband that, like, we're thankfully in Canada. So
Yes.
trying to explain to him what was going on in the States with women at that time too, and be like, I'm able to take a medication right now to try to remove this pregnancy. A lot of women can't.
Can't even do
They
that.
can't,
Yeah.
no, you don't have access to it. And like, I was able to be in the hospital when it ruptured both times. And that was just lucky timing because I know my body really, really well.
Yes.
And so it was telling him, like, other women have to, even if they find out at 6 weeks, could you imagine us finding out at 6 weeks and making it all the way to 10 and a half and being like, just waiting for something bad to happen
It
and
would
to
have been
rupture?
so
I'm
much
like,
worse. It would have been so much
horrible.
worse. You may have lost other
Yes,
parts of you, at that
of
point.
course.
Yeah.
And I may not have made it.
You
So
may
it's like,
not have made it. So on your
I'm
9 out of 10
grateful that we're
days,
in
you
Canada.
think
Yeah.
about all the gratitude you have and that you were in Canada to have the best of the best by
Yeah.
your side and all of that. But then 1 out of 10 days, you're like, are you kidding me? I couldn't keep one freaking tube,
Yeah.
And so, yes,
Yep.
I 100%, nobody gets that more than me. I swear to God. And when
Yep.
you, and what I say is when you're in that 1 out of 10 days, feel it all. Feel it all,
Yep.
hate everybody, that's okay. Do go through all of
Yes.
those feelings, but then you stand up. You
Yep.
stand up again and you keep moving. And that's the
Yep.
only way you make it through this life. Feel everything, cry all you want, lay on the floor all day, but then you have to get up.
Like I've had a couple friends since everything in the last year become pregnant, and they're pregnant right now and stuff like that. And every time they were so concerned with telling me or me finding out. And I'm like, listen, I have done so, like, I love pregnancy. I love birth. I love all of that. I've
You want
spent
to be part
5
of it. You
years.
want to talk about
Yeah,
it.
like
Yeah.
I have so much knowledge. It wasn't like I didn't just become pregnant. I spent years studying and educating myself about all of this. So if you have questions, I am a wealth of knowledge.
Mhm.
Use me. And
I
I
love it.
want to be a part of it. And I want to be supportive and happy for you. And I am.
Mhm.
But understand, I will have those moments by myself
Yeah.
where I'm upset and I'm
Right.
sad. And I'm allowed those. And no matter what, like, I'm going to have them, and that's my
It's your
place. But it's
journey
not going
and
to
it's
change
your
the
thing.
fact. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It's not going to change the fact that I'm so happy for you that you're getting
Absolutely.
this.
Elated for you.
And it's like, Yes, it's like, please don't fear my feelings. I'm going to have them no matter what. And I will always have
Yeah.
them. And if you don't
Yes.
trigger me, trust me, 90% of the movies out there, somebody gets pregnant. So it's
Right.
like,
Every single day. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I'm triggered every day. Every time I go to the grocery store and see a small child, it's still triggering for me.
yes.
So at least I get some joy when
Right.
you're telling me like this is your life and I get to share it with you and meet this little being and
Absolutely.
like
So
I
please
love babies
include
and
me.
kids.
Yes, please include me.
Yes.
That reminds me of a couple of my friends who lost, had miscarriages a number of
Yeah.
times, and they would say, "Gosh, I come to work and everyone acts like it didn't happen. No one talks about it."
The worst.
I want to talk about it. I want them to say, "Hey, how you feeling?" And of course you want
Yep.
to respectfully, like you said, ask for permission or however you want to broach it respectfully. But yeah, you don't want to leave that woman in a silo where now she's isolated and can't talk about it because now do I
Yep.
need to be ashamed? Like, why isn't anyone talking about this, right? When really it
Yeah.
would help if they said, "Hey, how you feeling, Janine? Like, how does that feel?" or whatever, right?
Yeah.
For you to not be isolated. That sucks.
Well, yeah, it went through like even with the pregnancies and all that when I was in the hospital and they asked me like, okay, so like you said you've had miscarriages before, like how many have you had? I'm like, honestly, I lost count. I'm like, it literally was multiple in a year. Now understanding that most ectopic pregnancies abort themselves and they probably were ectopic. They
Yeah.
just went early. Now understanding that is a totally different thing. But it was like I joke that I felt like an elephant because I was constantly in the first trimester and pregnant for like 2 straight years. It was I would get pregnant, then have like an early miscarriage, and then take a month off, and then get pregnant and have an early miss. It was like
Yeah.
multiple times a year. So I was like, I don't
Wow.
know. I lost count.
Yeah.
But it was like I wasn't because I was in a corporate job at that time too. I wasn't able to talk to the people that I spent 90% of my time with
Living with,
because
yeah.
as a woman trying to go up in a corporate job, I was unable to even tell them I was trying to get pregnant. So it was like it was this whole
Double
part of my
whammy.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I had to hide it and I was grieving and I didn't even take sick days and it was
Oh,
like
goodness.
it yeah, it was brutal. One of them I am way better about taking care of my needs now, but one of them I literally had a miscarriage while I was at work and continued the whole fucking day. I was yeah, and I was like so determined to just almost ignore it because it wasn't even the first one. I was like, I am just going to put my head down, focus on work, and get through today, and then go home and have a mental breakdown and come back to work tomorrow. And it was like, it was so dishonoring of myself and my needs that it's insane to me now. Like, what I put myself through then.
Yeah. The pressure that you put on yourself because of your
Yes.
fears of their expectations of you, whether it was work or friends or whomever, but certainly work in this one scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like I was more open with my friends and my family and stuff like that because I understood, well, my friends mostly, because I understood if, like, each time I lost it or something like that, who would I want to talk to about this? So I would tell them right away when I got pregnant, even though you're supposed to wait the certain amount of time. But I
13
was like,
weeks. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, if I lose it, I'm gonna need support. So
Yeah.
I would rather people know.
Yes. Tell a loved one who you know is your ride or die support. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, yeah. But it's just it's insane to me now knowing that I'm like I would not wish anybody going through that. Like, yeah, I did not honor how I felt at all.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy now.
And I think too that's part of how things used to be too, right? Like our
Yep.
what we think we should do, what we how we think we should act. I think that's slowly changing with the generation, with the kids
Yeah.
like my kids' age and this new generation,
Yeah.
they are very say what they feel, say what they want, ask for things. Us millennials are parenting very differently than baby boomers parented us. And
Yeah.
so they will be better off, I think, in that way, in terms of saying what they want and need, much better than us. Even though I'm
Yeah.
older than you, I'm sure it was similar where you didn't, you're not considering yourself. Just by that example, I can tell that it's similar
Yes.
to how I was as well. And I still have to work on that. I still have to say, wait a minute, what do I
Yes.
need? What do I want? With my childhood,
Yeah.
that's layers of not honoring my feelings. So I have to be conscious every day of, do you actually
Yeah.
want this? Did you really like that? Right? Because it was just a matter of, I see you laughing because you know exactly what I'm talking
I
about.
do it so much.
Right?
And it's like going through everything. All of my friends and my family is like, I want to be there for you. Tell me if I can come over and help you. And I was like, I don't want anybody around me because I know that I will shove down my feelings and to make sure that you are okay if
Right.
you're around me. And
Yes.
I need to be a fucking mess right now.
Right.
And so it's like I would love to have you here, but also I need to
To be
grieve and I
selfish. I
can't
need to
do
be
that.
selfish
Yeah.
in this moment,
Yes.
and I don't want to be
Yes.
considerate in this moment. And so,
No.
right. And so to not have to consider you and your feelings, I'd rather
Yes.
just keep to myself. It's funny because that reminds me of when I was in the NICU, and the NICU was at the tallest, like above my floor in the hospital. And I would come down to see my girls that I worked with, and bringing milk to the NICU, etc., pumped milk, which I did all the
Yeah.
time. I became a slave to the pump. Um, and I would go see the girls downstairs, and I remember constantly being asked, when's he coming home, and how's he doing? And as sweet as that was,
Yeah.
every time it felt like now I have to make up an answer for them, when really the person who wants these answers more than anybody is me. And guess what? I don't know when
Yes.
he's coming home. And actually he
Yes.
regressed. He may not come home for weeks.
Yep.
And and actually
Yep.
I'm not sleeping. Like, so it made me
Yeah.
realize, again, back to the 9 out of 10, I honestly believe it made me a better nurse and just human overall, because
Yep.
I'm considerate of that. When I'm looking at someone and whatever they're going through, especially if it's traumatic, I
Yeah.
try to ask questions that I know that they don't have to dig up some answer for me to please me.
Yes.
I try
Yeah.
to leave it very general, and whatever they want to tell me, they'll tell me. But I never say
Yeah.
things like, when, is your kid coming home, or when do you think this will end, or none of these things, because the person you're
No.
asking wants to know more than you do, you know.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And you never want to chance them being like, I just found out today that the kid's never coming home.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
I wouldn't want to say that out loud as
Yes.
somebody in that situation. Like, and honestly, I think something that's super not understood in a lot of ways, it's starting to get some more traction, is understanding hormones and postpartum.
Oh my gosh.
It's so insane what
So
women
true.
go through
So true.
and the hormone levels of people. And then we're supposed to just be like, okay. And especially not even just dealing with a traumatic birth in any way or having your kid in the NICU, just a regular birth,
Just a
what your
regular.
body goes through.
Yes. It's yes, absolutely. Postpartum
It's,
is a whole nother subject, and
yeah.
which I went through and had very little support, but also not
Yes.
knowing that I was going through it. That is, like you said, even if you have a
Yeah.
normal delivery, vaginal delivery, you're home in 2 days, 8-pound baby, you squatted in the field,
Yes.
even then, and even with all the support,
Yeah.
but I had the perfect recipe for postpartum. I had a NICU baby. I had very
Mhm.
little support at the time. My husband was a waiter. We had very little money. And so if
Yeah.
he wasn't helping me, he was working. And then I have, missed my mother all of my life. But man, when you have a baby, There is nothing
Yep.
more painful than not having your
Yeah.
mother there. There is nothing. I mean,
And
I
never
used her
having
most.
even a yeah, like never even having a maternal figure to look up to.
No,
Like you never had that in
no,
your life, let alone a mom.
no, no. I don't know what that's like. I mean, I've seen my friends all have moms,
Yeah.
and I had great relationships with all, a lot of women
Yeah.
who were mothers of my friends and still do. And so I see what that should look like. But no, it does not feel like, if not for the cemetery and pictures, I wouldn't believe I had a mom. It's like I was cut out of stone.
Yeah.
I have no,
Yes.
I was cut out of stone. And
Yeah.
yeah, no maternal figure. I mean, I had aunties, and some of them were cool. Not everyone was bad, like the one that raised me.
Yeah.
But even still, they weren't really maternal figures. No.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one thing to be related, but the other ones raised you and were
Yes.
there for you every single day. And it's really interesting, like when you start becoming an adult and getting into relationships and everything, when you don't have proper references of what love is supposed to feel like, it can cause so much turmoil in like upcoming relationships. And you're like, I don't know, why are we fighting or arguing, or why are you treating me like crap? And it's like, well, because in my mind that represents love and that represents what partnership is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not talking bad at all about my now ex.
Yeah.
My kid's dad is now my ex, and we're friends. We're friendly. So I
Yes.
have only respect for him and for my kids. I'm not going to say anything negative, but what I will say is, because of what you just said,
Yeah.
what I saw in a partner, or what I thought was what I needed in a partner, and what I thought I wanted was incorrect. It's taken
Yeah.
me years. I mean, probably when I turned 40, I would say. So it's only been, a couple of years that I have really sat back and taken in what that means,
Yep.
and why I picked what I picked. Because to me, when I got married, I just wanted someone to love me stupidly. That's all I wanted, which makes sense, right? I mean, for someone like me,
Yes.
right? No mom, no dad. I mean, you don't have,
Yep.
once you lose your parents, if you had good ones, you don't
Yeah.
have unconditional love. They are the only people who can give it to you, are your parents. I mean,
Yeah.
your kids can love you, but best believe once the man or woman comes into their life, one day they're gone, right? I mean, they'll love you always, but
Yep.
you can hurt them enough to where they'll be like, peace out, mama, I'm done, or whatever.
Yes.
But your
Yeah.
mother, my kids could shoot me in the chest and I'll still love them, you know?
Yep.
That's unconditional love that I believe only your parents can give you. So when you don't have that, for
Yeah.
me at least, that's all I wanted. And it's like everything else sat on the back burner because love was enough, but really it's not, right? There are other
No.
things. Love don't pay the bills, as they say,
Nope.
and so I definitely, I feel you with that comment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find like I'm still with my husband right now. We've been together for I don't know, like 11 years or something.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's the times where even we struggle. And it's like, of course, especially over the last few years, we've struggled a few times.
Yeah.
And taking those moments to realize that it wasn't that I was unhappy in our marriage, it was I was unhappy as a person. And it was like, whether I was in this marriage or not, I would be unhappy right now. And so it's like,
Mm,
okay, let's fix
right.
that and fix my happiness as a human being,
Hmm.
and then decide, okay, am I unhappy in the marriage? I'm like, no, I was just going through a
Through
huge
your
spout
own
of like
thing. Yeah.
grief and depression
Yeah.
and all of that. And it's like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Like, I don't, I try not to rely on him to make me happy. And
Absolutely.
it's like, yeah,
Yeah. No, that's great.
I've always, yeah, I've always said, I'm like, I'm not with you because I have to be. I'm with you because I want to be. There is a massive difference in a relationship like that.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the case for me too, until I didn't want to be anymore.
Yeah.
But my wants also had changed drastically from
Yes.
27 when I got married to, to where I'm at now.
Yeah.
Very different, so but with my traumas and having no good male figure and all of that, it's no surprise that I wouldn't have used, all the tools that I needed to pick a partner for
Yep.
myself. And that's not saying speaking badly. It's just saying, hey, it it wasn't
No.
for me. It wasn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, with your nursing and stuff like that, what has been like one of the most rewarding experiences with nursing for you?
Oh my gosh. So I became a nurse in 2008. In 2010, I was named Nurse of the Year by the March of Dimes. And
Wow.
that was, a huge feat for a brand new nurse. I'd been a nurse for 2 years. Um,
Yeah.
and so, and
Yeah.
I just loved my patients. I'm still a nurse. I'm a nurse manager though, and I work remotely, so I don't have the bedside piece anymore. But I loved
Mm.
my patients. I mean, I treated them like family. When I've always been in the maternal and infant space, so regardless of NICU or nursery or whatever I was doing, I treated those women and those babies like they were my sister and they were my baby. You know, that's just me.
Yeah.
That's just the same Hanan
Yeah.
that loves and just, I know how to love good. I think that's probably the best thing I bring to this world is I love hard, and I loved my patients, every single one of
Yes.
them. And I'm not just saying that, I
Yeah.
really just loved my patients. Like I would get these postpartum women and get them up after a C-section and help them like I would want my sister to be helped, and
Yeah.
I think as I'm saying this, I remember probably one of the moments that to this day makes me cry. I was probably, 5 years or so into nursing, and I was working night shift. I was doing postpartum and nursery, and there was a C-section lady who needed, so when you've had a C-section at the hospital I worked at, you after 12 hours you have to get up for the first time, right, to make sure your legs are
Ooh.
working good. We have to go try and we clean you up. It's a big thing to get up for the first time, because what do you feel like?
Yes.
You've been cut in half, like literally you feel like you've
Yep.
been cut in half, and you have
Yeah.
been, you know
Yes.
so and you have been, and so I would
Yeah.
try and set them up, tell them as much to expect before we got up,
Yeah.
and gave them meds before we got up and all that. So there was this Latina woman. I was helping her get up for the first time, and the first time was always difficult to get on, just to get on the toilet, to wash them with us, our little Perry spray bottle that we give
Yep.
every woman. Yeah. So I'd show her how to wash and how to wipe and then put on her pad and panties by herself. But I did it all for that first
Yeah.
time to show them, because I'm that OCD nurse. I want you to get it right. So I'll show her how to do it.
Yes.
And I remember being on my knees, getting the pad ready after I'd washed this woman. And her
Yeah.
mother was standing behind me watching, and she couldn't speak English. But she says,
Mm.
she's watching me do that. And she says, you go to heaven.
Oh.
She says, you go to heaven. Wow. She was just shocked. And I said, thank you, but this is how I would want a nurse to treat my sister. I'm not
Yeah.
doing this for blessings. I'm doing it because this is how, if I don't show her, no one will ever show her. Next thing you know, she's, doing the wrong things, got an infection and all that. So I do
And
what I would
yeah.
want for me and mine.
And there's a difference between showing your patients how to do things and caring for them. And it's like, and showing them that way, because it's like you could have gone in and be like, okay, do this, then this, then
Right.
this, and you have to make sure you do this and all of that.
Which many nurses did, like
Yes.
spray the bottle and they
Yes.
watch. And that's okay. but that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to, get
No.
down and dirty and show them just like I would have wished someone did for me,
Yes.
you know.
And in those moments of vulnerability, showing the people that you care and the gentleness of that is worth more than anything.
100%.
Because in my mind, like all pregnancies are traumatic,
Oh
all of them.
yes. Oh yes.
So it's like they're needing, like women just went through the most traumatic, vulnerable experience of their life, and they're needing somebody to be super caring and gentle.
Yes, empathetic and
Yeah.
compassionate and just, there to help regardless. I mean, that type of experience,
Yeah.
there were many. I mean, I forged relationships with so many of my patients because when they were leaving, if I had had them 2, sometimes 4 days, if they were a C-section, they were leaving and I felt like I had a new family member. So, and part of it is I'm
Yeah.
Lebanese and that's just how we are, everybody's family. But my patients really were very special to me. There's many that still keep in touch, send me their babies' photos because I
That's
truly, I
amazing.
truly cared and care about them,
Yes.
and so it's hard to give examples, but those are the couple that I could think of right off the bat.
All right. So I think one of the other kind of things that's happened massively for people over the last few years,
Yeah.
obviously, is COVID.
Hmm.
So, like, what was it like for you for nursing and all of that during COVID?
Yeah. So I was the lucky one of the lucky ones that had just started a remote life. Like I've been in the remote
Mm,
nursing world for 6 years. So I was out.
amazing.
Yeah, I was out of the bedside. And so I really
Yeah.
felt for my nurse buddies who were at the hospital because man, what they shared with me was really tough. They had to check in
Yeah.
at this department outside the hospital, get masked and gloved and gowned, and then go to this side. And then, it was awful. For me, I was remote. And so it was just a matter the first year where the kids were fully remote, no school. That was really tough
Yes.
because my work had to, keep going. And so
Yep.
that was tough because, I had a 5-year-old learning to use the computer for meetings at school. He was in first grade, having to learn how to accept and join a meeting. And same with my older.
I still mess that up.
Right. So imagine, so yeah, I mean, I had to deal with that, and my ex wasn't too helpful. I was kind of doing it all. Part of why I left, and so
Yes.
um, you know that was rough. But just like you were saying earlier, the trauma because of that, he's better at the computer than me. My once 5-year
Yes.
old who's now 10. So we went through all of that, but now he's a computer whiz. So um, honestly, COVID didn't hit me nearly as bad as my other medical healthcare friends because I was remote. Um, it was just tough because I didn't have much support. I was working and I was in leadership, so high expectations, corporate job, and had these kids calling for me, having to get up and cook while I was in a meeting. All of that.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. But for someone like me who has like fought wars to survive, that is just yeah, I got through it. It's okay. Those
I know.
those kind of things become like small fish for me.
I
Because I've
know.
just, I've been through so much worse. So it was tough, it was really tough, but hey, as long as you're not taking away my freedom, you know,
Yes.
standing on my back, berating me, as long as I'm free,
Yeah.
I'll figure the rest out, you know?
Yeah, there were a few moments that even I had like family and stuff come to me, and I could always tell somebody's base level of trauma because they would be like, "Oh, I'm so like anxious right now. I just went to the grocery store and someone was standing too close." And I'm like, "I've been living like that for like 10 years. Enjoy."
Right.
Like I am like, you guys are getting a minor glimpse of what I have been living my life like.
Like,
I loved going to the grocery store with trauma during COVID because it was like empty. I was like, this
yes,
is incredible.
right,
Like,
right.
I don't have to
It was
track
joyous for
every
you.
person.
Yeah,
And yes, I'm like, people are giving me my space.
yes.
And I'm just like, and they don't,
People
oh, this is
barely talking to
amazing.
you. Yeah, yes, yes. So now,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
anxiety, would you say, because that kind of anxiety is clinical, right? Would you say
Yes.
that's clinical? Okay, that's not
Yeah.
situational, right?
That was,
Or would you say
it
it's
was a
both?
bit of
Yeah,
both.
yeah.
Yeah. So, because one of my large traumas that happened years ago that triggered like the massive amount of PTSD was I was robbed at gunpoint. And so, having people close to me triggered me because like they
Mhm.
shoved me from behind and stuck a gun in my face while I was at work. So that for me, having people like in a grocery store when people are walking behind an aisle and all of a sudden they pop out in front of you, literally sent a full attack into my body every single time. So grocery stores were horrible. I could like, yeah, it was really bad. So it's still, I still have moments of that
Mhm.
from time to time. Like
Yeah,
it's gotten an insane amount better.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was where it was like when people were like, "Oh yeah, I feel really scared and worried when somebody's close to me," and I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
yours
I
was
get that."
a situation, an event caused this. So yours is more, I would say,
Yes,
situational versus like some people have anxiety just because, like, wake up with it,
yes.
have it no matter what. You don't have that, or do
It
you?
it was kind of almost like, well, and it's hard to say in my mind what came first, the chicken or the egg. It's
Right.
like I
Yeah.
had previous traumas growing up, so then it's like, did I have mild anxiety and depression because of the previous traumas or vice versa? Like
Right.
who
Right.
knows what feeds into what at that point? Like
Yes. Yeah.
realizing it was actually really interesting cuz a lot of people got upset with me when I first started saying this, but explaining that my trauma was my fault. And it wasn't that the situation was my fault, but the PTSD reaction. I'm like, it's my brain causing this. There is literally nothing physical for me to be afraid of right now, but my brain thinks it is. So
Hmm.
that part is my fault, whether I can control it or not.
Hmm.
It's my brain.
Right.
Like
Right.
it's, yeah.
Yeah. Like you realize then that you had the power
Yes.
to sail, that you are the captain of your own ship, regardless if it's your fault or not, it's yours, right? And so
Yes.
you are sailing this ship and you are in charge of
Yep.
the trajectory of where it's headed.
And sometimes there's bad weather,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's hard to keep a hold of the direction,
Yes,
but understanding that use your tools, use what you have to calm the seas
absolutely.
and make it a little bit easier. So understanding that when my brain would go into a hyper anxious stage, knowing that if I pull in my analytical side,
Yeah.
it helped kind of redirect my brain. So I would like play card games with myself
Hmm.
because it helped kick in the other part of my brain and stopped fight or flight and started logic. And it
Hmm.
was like things like that just helped me.
Right. Realizing what worked and what works for you. That's
Yeah.
huge, though. Right. You mentioned
Yes.
tools. I always talk about the toolbox metaphor, that as you go through life, each experience, good or bad, you forge a
Mhm.
new tool to add to your toolbox. And ideally,
Yeah.
the real gift is to be able to identify all the tools you have in
Yep.
your toolbox to say, you know what, actually, this don't work too well for Janine. Maybe I should,
Yes.
maybe I should
It
go this
used
way.
to.
Right. Yes, it used to.
Yeah.
It used
Yeah.
to.
And it had its place and its time. Awesome.
Yes.
Let's not use that anymore.
Right. that doesn't work
Yeah.
anymore. And sometimes,
No.
burn that bridge. Every now and then you got to burn a bridge, right? I mean, so
Yep.
whatever it is that works for you, being able to identify the tools you need and the tools you have in your toolbox. And ideally, by the time you're a grown woman, you have a nice, nicely filled toolbox, ideally.
Yes. Yes. Oh, it's a very full toolbox at this point. But it's like
Right.
also finding those points of knowing myself, knowing my body, knowing me and trusting myself again
Yes.
is massive, and knowing that like okay, I know that if I start feeling this, if I don't do one of these 5 things, it is going to escalate to this, and then it's gonna be
Even
harder to come
worse.
back from, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like not pushing down like, oh, I'm feeling a little anxious today. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, did you eat properly? Are you drinking enough water?
Yes.
Did you do your stretches? Have you meditated? Like simple things. If you haven't done those, do them now. Otherwise, by tonight, you're going to have a full blown panic attack.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing that you're self-mothering and also being self-intuitive
Yes.
in that way to where
Yep.
you're really digging into the granular pieces of you. I love that.
Yeah. And it's realizing that sometimes different emotions can feel like the same thing, like anxiety and excitement. So
Mm.
it's like when I'm super excited to do the podcast and stuff like that. Sometimes it feels like anxiety.
Yes.
But I'm like, okay, am I really anxious? Am I going into fear mode? And if so, why? Like,
Hmm.
what would be the worst case scenario?
Right.
And then it's like, okay, once I've gotten rid of that, it's like, okay, no, it's actually excitement.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Let's put a smile on while you're feeling this. Otherwise, it starts to feel more panicky.
Yes. No, I love that. That's amazing how you work through
Yeah.
those feelings.
Yeah, I've got a lot of feelings. That's not something I push down a lot. I'm like, oh God,
Good.
there's so many all of the
Yeah.
time. Like,
Well, you have a platform now and you can work, I'm sure this helps, right? Meeting
yeah.
different people and working
Yeah.
through discussing all of these things, I'm sure helps you at the end of the day, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
has to. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'm doing it for me and for other
Right.
people, and yeah, it's just trusting that, like I said, like when I start these episodes and stuff, I'm like, sure, I have a general idea of some of the questions that I kind of want to ask, but I like it being a
Fluid.
conversation because
Yes.
I
Yeah.
like
It's
dropping
awesome how
into
you
it
do
and being
this.
like, okay, what? Yeah. Well, and it's like what I need to trust that I don't know everything. And sometimes what somebody needs to hear in the episode, if I stick to straight questions, they won't get that. And you have that missing piece of information that is going to change somebody's life. And if I stick us in this perfect little
Box.
container, then maybe that gets missed. I
Yes.
have to trust that what comes out is what's supposed to help the most amount of people at the time.
Absolutely. I think being fluid
But
is,
yeah.
and not rigid is definitely hands down the
Yeah.
better way to go. Yeah, I mean, of course,
Yeah.
asking questions, that you prepare are great, but sort of just letting it grow organically, the conversation is what I 100% prefer anyways. So I'm glad that's your
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah, that was one thing when I told my husband about starting a podcast. He was like, "Well, you've never really interviewed anybody." I'm like, "Are you kidding? I love to talk. I interview everybody all the time. You guys just don't consider it an
Just
interview."
don't realize I've been interviewing you all along, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, are you kidding? I will find a way to ask a question. And like, I'm always doing it out of curiosity. It's never that like gotcha moment or anything like that. I'm honestly just love knowing about people. Like,
Yes.
always.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's incredible all the different journeys. Everybody has their own unique journey and everybody can teach you
Yeah.
something. Everybody, young, old, in between.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter status, doesn't matter how much money, doesn't matter anything, walk of life.
Yeah.
Everybody can teach you something, just like you can teach something every single day. If only people are ready to
Yeah.
receive, and you are, So yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And the biggest learning lesson that I've had over the years is I have a lot to share. I have a lot to give. I have retained an insane amount of knowledge about so many things because that's what I love.
Yeah.
But just because I know something and I think it will help you does not mean that I need to shove it down your throat.
Yes.
That was a big thing where it's like, at least with my clients, I'm like, you guys literally pay me for this. You pay me to help you.
Yes.
But if you're just a friend, I started things even with my mom and my friends and stuff. I'm like, okay, so right now you called me in the middle of the day. I'm in work mode. So do you want friend Janine or do you want work Janine?
Right.
Let me know which brain you're wanting right now because I can give you all the advice and help you out and all of that. Or do you need somebody to just be like, you know what, that
Yeah.
sucks. I'm sorry you're going through
Listening
that.
ear. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What version of me do you want right
That's
now?
a good
Because
question.
I
I like
will,
that. I
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I need that sometimes where it's like I go to somebody, I'm like, I don't need a solution. Trust me, I'm very analytical. I've probably come up with 20 different solutions
Yeah.
for something. I
Yeah.
just need to vent for a
And
second.
share. Yes.
Yeah,
Listening ear,
yeah,
non-judgmental listening ear.
yeah. And to feel that community aspect to it where I don't feel like, even though I do a lot of things on my own with my healing journey, I don't feel like everything is on my own because sometimes when I do something and it works really well, I share it with my friends like, "Hey, I did this."
Mhm.
And yeah.
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 I I once heard the term shame lives in should. and
Mm.
and I ever since then have become very conscious because it's something that we all say all the time when giving advice
Yeah.
to our friends, family, whatever. You should do, right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, it still comes out here and there when you're giving advice. It's hard to shy away from that term, but I try to be conscious when I'm giving advice to stay away from the you should versus, you
Yep.
know, this would be nice, or maybe consider this, versus I think it comes across as judgmental, or, more as
Yeah.
like barking orders, when really maybe they just wanted a listening ear or some very gentle advice, right? Not a command.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have to be careful when you're giving advice.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I like redirecting it as like with my clients, it was like, okay, instead of should, it's the what would. What would it look like to you in your life if you tried this?
This. Yeah.
And then it's like, then they're like, I don't really like that. I don't like how it feels. And we're like, okay. So then what part of it don't you like? Is it the whole thing? Is it that you don't want that outcome? Is it like,
Mhm.
let's try and pinpoint there?
Really
But it's
breaking
like
it up. Yeah.
asking, yeah, it's asking people their opinions on their own life instead of telling them your opinion on their
Right.
life.
What do you think they should do?
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, another amazing thing that you've done is you are also the founder of an incredible nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, absolutely. So, when I left Ghana, so as actually even before I left as a little girl, once I was orphaned, I remember thinking in my 8-year old brain, I'm lucky. I at least have
Yeah.
family. I at least have my siblings. I was blessed with gratitude, and my and if
Yeah.
I wasn't grateful, my grandma and aunt made sure I knew that I wasn't grateful for something, and I had to be grateful for just being alive every single day. So I have grateful embedded in my core. And I remember being 8 or 9 and thinking, gosh, I'm so lucky. I have my siblings, I have my grandma, I have a huge family. What do the kids that don't have that do? At least I'm not in an
Yeah.
orphanage. And I knew,
Yeah.
Ghana has so much poverty, and I just always wanted to help those. I wish I could have been 8-year old, volunteer helping out some orphans like me, and making a bunch of friends. That's what I imagined, right? I always knew that I wanted to make a difference. I didn't know how I would, but I knew I would. And so
Yeah.
when I had Ramsey, um, with that near death experience, I just constantly said, so in my year after having him, towards the end of the year is
Mm.
when my postpartum depression started to kick in. How could it not? Perfect
Yeah.
recipe. And my depression
Yes.
came from I started having this plaguing thought, what would I have done in Ghana if I had had this baby in Ghana? He certainly would have
Yeah.
died. Maybe I would have made it, maybe not. And that thought
Yeah.
plagued my mind incessantly. I
Yeah.
could not turn it off.
Yeah.
And it started to depress me, and it started to eat at my spirit. Like, okay, Hanan, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I couldn't shut that voice off. And so one day,
Yeah.
I literally got on my computer and I was like, I'm gonna start a nonprofit, and I'm gonna help mothers and babies in Ghana. And if I help one mother and one baby, then hey, I've done something good, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and literally just like that, I created the nonprofit overnight, and then I had to learn everything, which took, yeah, I'm still learning. But in the next several weeks, I realized, okay, I need to be a 501c3, which in the States is like an official tax deductible, nonprofit. It's an official nonprofit. And so that's what
Yeah.
separates the men from the boys. I knew I had to have that. And so that took
Yes.
me, I didn't have the money to pay a lawyer to file the paperwork for me. So I did it all on my own, researched everything, filed the paperwork, and waited like a year and a few months, and I got it. And then, but even while I was waiting for the paperwork, I could still do good work. So I would raise money
Yep.
from like the hospital I worked at, and I would send medical supplies to Ghana. So my mission is to eradicate maternal and infant mortality, one mother and baby at a time. And so I would send, I was working with a medical student who had been in Ghana, and found she was working at the hospital where these women, they're not the women, but their NICU had no oxygen supplies. So if a baby was born needing anything more than an ambu bag, the bagged oxygen, if they needed continuous
Yeah.
oxygen, they were dying. And so that was my
God.
first big project. Was I was able to raise enough money to buy them all of this medical supplies to save these babies. That was my first big project. And I was like, holy crap, how, I can't believe, like, going from one mother and a baby to like helping this hospital. And they were then able to take care of their NICU babies who needed oxygen. So that was my first big project. And since then, that was in 2012, is when I
Wow.
started all of this. And then since then, I've done work in India. I've done work in different parts of Ghana. I did work locally in Atlanta. I've done work at orphanages, battered women's shelters, helped the Syrian refugees in Lebanon. I've done feeding, like feeding, not when I say mission trip, I don't mean religious, just mission for the work.
Yeah.
I've done feeding mission trips in
Yep.
India because I worked with an Indian nurse who was like, please help this town. She was from Punjab, India. And she's like, I really would love it if you could collaborate with me to help out my village. So we did some feeding trips there, and like just had lines of people we were feeding. Um, Lots and lots of great work. 4 years ago, a California nonprofit by the name of Empty Bowls, they heard about what I was
Mhm.
doing, and they gave us a small grant to 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 start something, but it had to be feeding, like, initiative only. Like, that's what the focus had to be. So
Yeah.
I had to sort
Yeah.
of redo my mission.
You're like, I'm not turning down
I'm not
this
turning
grant.
right.
I'm just gonna
I'm
figure
going to
out how to
revamp
make it
how
work
to make
in
it work.
my
Yes,
structure. Yeah.
100%. Sorry about my dogs.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, it's all good.
because I knew I had to. If I didn't take this money, I was going to continue to be
Yes.
raising funds to send it, across the seas, get a small
Yeah.
project done. And not to say that, I'm not belittling them, but they were all. It was a lot of work for a little bit of money to then take care of one need. And I
Yes.
knew that I wanted something sustainable, so that I
Yep.
wasn't constantly having to raise money, because man, that is a hard thing to do. And I've done it for
Yes.
11 years. And so when
Yeah.
they gave me this money, I thought, what can I do that can help people, provide value, and bring money back to the farm eventually? And so I came up
Yeah.
with a fish farm in rural Ghana that I
Mm.
broke ground on 4 years ago with a like that small grant. It was 10 grand, but I was able to buy a small
Yeah.
piece of land, start, with breaking ground, and then with my shoestring budget, 4 years later, I have a cute little fish farm that is almost done. I mean, there's, of course, we always need, but
Yes.
slowly over 4 years, I've been able to build a fish farm, and it feeds people. It will feed many more when it's
Yeah.
complete. It's provided jobs. It'll provide even more. We're employing women. A lot of these women were on
Yeah.
the streets, were putting their kids in school because the kids could not go to school. They had to help their moms with, selling, the hawkers, etc. They had to help mom out. So we're putting their kids in school, taking them off the street, providing employment, teaching them a trade. And then we have agricultural students who come to our farm, and we can teach them how to sustainably fish. So it's like a four
Mm.
in one project. And, the gifts are going
Yeah.
to be for generations to come.
Yeah, it was amazing kind of diving into the website and everything that you have for the charity, because just watching that slowly happening, like watching the building of it and everything, and then all of a sudden watching you like feeding fish in this little thing. I was like, that's
Isn't it
amazing.
so cool?
And it's
So
so
cool.
cool. And what I loved about it too that you explained in one of the videos was like it was a fishing community,
Yes.
and you weren't going in trying to like almost decimate their fishing community. It was like you were building and working with it instead of being against it. And it was
Absolutely.
like that was super important
I'm
to
so
like
glad you
build
watched the
that village up.
videos. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I love
Yes.
that.
I told you I do deep dives. I can't help myself, especially
Incredible.
when I love something. I'm like,
Aw.
oh, so like some of the TikTok videos, I'm like, this is great.
That's
Oh,
great. I mean, it, yes, this farm is definitely the biggest project we've ever
yeah,
undertaken. And to have gone from, rubble to our little
yeah,
farm that the fish are thriving, and we have employees and volunteers, and to have seen it grow and out of nothing really is just a testament
yeah,
to what I was saying earlier about self belief. Because I tell you, if I didn't believe, and if I didn't
yes,
envision, and if I didn't think that I could do it, I wouldn't have done it. 12 years ago, 11 years
yeah,
ago, I would have been like, oh, that's a nice theory that you want to help people, but it would have ended there,
yep,
and but I
yeah,
could not turn that voice down. I knew in my gut that I had to do something, and I'm so glad I did, because now
yeah,
lives have changed. As a matter of fact, one of my brothers, my dad's first son before he met my mom,
yeah,
he is the lead fisherman. He's like my GM on the farm.
yeah,
He was his dream has been, he was a fisherman, and his dream was to be in the fishing business, but was kind of um, rough life, didn't have much guidance, and kind
yeah,
of became um, what's the word? I hate to say destitute, but he, was jobless, and having
yeah,
struggling with life. And I reached out to him one day when I got that grant, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a chance at this. I need you to give it your all, and I'll give you my all, and we can create something amazing." And
yeah,
man, his life has changed forever. He's now a
yeah,
fisherman every single day, gets to teach kids how to fish, and teach them how to spawn.
He just looks like he's absolutely
He
loving
is
it too.
so
Like
happy.
it's the passion. It's one thing to have people working with you and stuff, or to bring him on and partner up and stuff, but to see the passion in people is what really makes a difference.
Yes.
And it's not just like, oh yeah, he's helping me and he's doing this. It's like he's so
He's so
passionate
passionate.
about it
And his
too.
life's
And
changed,
that,
you
yeah,
know, and his
yeah,
wife's life's changed. She's part of it too. She actually,
yeah,
I was going to comment about what you said about coming to decimate the community. Yes, I wanted to be, I was
yes,
very aware and intentional about this because I know that nonprofits can come into a community and cripple the community because they think
yep,
that this is what the community needs, right? And that's what so
yes.
many
It's our
nonprofits.
perception of what they need.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I knew that that's not what I wanted to do. So actually, my brother's wife, who was a local, we had her, she's the community outreach navigator. We had her go into the community and ask them what they need, what they want, spoke to the
yeah,
elders, spoke to the chiefs, because this is rural Ghana where we still have chiefs. And
yes,
so she came back and said, I know you want to do this and this and this, but the community says they want help getting these women off the streets. They want the children to have
yeah,
education and they want some kind of health care. So we listened. And so we have forged and trained, changed the trajectory of the farm based on the community's desires, needs, feedback,
yeah.
etc. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't just like, oh, this is my perception of what I feel would be best for you
Right.
guys. Again, it's like, what would make your life better? Because I could look at you and be like, oh, you just need food. But it's like, no, they needed that community and the education and, again, that passion and support. It wasn't just one little part of it.
Absolutely. Yes. And I do think that's why we will be very successful because we have the community
Yeah.
behind us, you know,
And the
and the
passion.
passion and the passion.
You,
Yes.
it's, yeah,
Yes.
it's, you have you behind it. So
That's right.
in like my work and stuff like that, my husband's asked me a couple times, he's like, well, what makes you think that you can be successful at this? I was like, me. I think I can make this successful
Yes.
because I have a passion behind it.
Right.
Nobody has my fire and passion like me because I am one of a
Yes.
kind.
Unique
Everybody is.
individual. Yes.
And it's, yeah. And it's like you found what lights you up and what you will fight for. And
100%.
as people with trauma, when we fight
Oh,
hard.
to
So
the
it's like,
death.
yes.
Yes, yes. Either you realize, okay, I fought, I gave it a good fight, it wasn't for me, but I tried. I would rather
Yep.
take the risk than lose the chance.
Yes.
I would rather
Yep.
try and say that I didn't succeed in it, but I tried, than to have not
Yeah.
tried at all. I know several
Yeah.
hospice nurses. As a matter of fact, one of my besties used to be a hospice nurse of years. And the
Yeah.
stories you hear when people are taking their last breath, the number one
Yeah.
regret is shoulda, coulda, woulda. I wish I had. I wish I had.
Yeah.
And I will not say those words. I will say I gave it
Yeah.
my all. I tried.
Yeah.
I did. I shared. I stood up. I spoke up. I will not be ridden
Yeah.
with regret. I don't
Yeah.
believe in regrets because I don't
Nope.
live that way. If I want something,
Nope.
I'll do my best to get it. If I don't get it, at least I tried. I can go to sleep at peace. Like, hey, you tried.
And in that journey of me trying, I learned something
Yes,
that is a missing piece for something later on where I'm
100%.
like, okay, yeah, that didn't work out, but oh my God, I learned this one thing and that's going to help this situation so much better,
Yes.
which the outcome of that is better than I ever could have
Right. And
imagined.
at least you tried. At least you
Yes.
tried. The worst
Yep.
thing is feeling like you should have and you didn't. That's what eats people alive with regret. I
Yeah.
wish I had gone for my dream.
Yep.
I wish I had done this. And so for me, I am making sure that all the things I want to do, I told you my dream was to be an actress. I have an agent. I actually just had an audition the other
Yep.
day. 41. Who
That's
cares?
amazing.
It's not too late.
Who gives a
Yep.
shit?
Who cares?
It's literally, yeah, like everything in my life. If I'm holding myself back from something, I have to ask myself
Why?
why. And if it's because of somebody else, either their opinions or anything like that, this life is mine
Yes.
and it's for
Yes.
me. And if I can't authentically be myself with that person, that's their problem.
Right. 100%.
Like, then, yeah.
Yes. Yes, Janine. Preach, girl. I love it. I love it.
I love that you got an acting, like you're doing all of that
Yes.
too now. Like, that's
Yes. I am do
amazing.
everything I have wanted to do. I have at least tried.
Yep.
And with acting in before my 40th birthday, I said to myself, once I had, finished with divorce and all of that, I was gonna once I sort of took my first breath and stood on my feet, I promised myself I was gonna try and get an agent and do some
Yeah.
auditions and do things for me, something that I
Yeah.
rarely did in the past. And so I went on some auditions. I got signed. I've had several auditions. Hopefully one of them will take here soon. Um, and I'm going for it. Like there's nothing stopping
Yeah.
me, because if it did, if it would only be me that was standing in my way, you know.
And honestly, with somebody with such an incredible story and everything, part of what I see for you too is like this massive inspiration for people. And if you didn't have the confidence of the acting and being in front of people and that personality that comes with it, then it would be harder for you to go out and inspire people. And so it's like being okay with being in the light
Public
and being
speaking,
seen.
yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
is massive. So it's like being an inspirational speaker for people is kind of a form of acting. Like you're basically on stage, you are
You
performing.
are,
And
you are, and you have to
yeah,
be comfortable on stage, speaking to people, all the
yes,
things, eye contact, etc. And that's where I feel most comfortable. Not necessarily on stage, but I love this. I could do this all day,
yes,
and it's
I
it's
know.
very fulfilling. I love to talk. I love to
Yeah,
help people with my narrative, to know for them to
yeah,
know that they too can do it, because my story is so crazy that just about every trauma I've had, right?
yes,
So I can share, like, yo, NICU baby, yep, add it to
yeah,
the pile. I did that too. Left,
yeah,
traveled across the seas. I did that too. Alone, door to
yeah,
door sales. Yep, that one too. So I can help a lot of people by them seeing.
yes,
And the best but most painful thing of it all is that through most of my journey, there was no cheerleader. There was no support.
just
There was
yourself.
nobody saying, "Hey, and you got this." When
Yeah,
I started the nonprofit, everybody told me I was crazy. As a matter of fact, the advice I
yep.
got was, "Yeah, it's a big undertaking. Maybe join another
It's a waste
nonprofit."
of
Yeah, it's a huge
time.
undertaking.
Yeah,
Join another
yeah,
nonprofit. Not that that was bad advice, but it sort of like pushed me down, or would have had I listened to
yeah,
it. When I was going to nursing school, I met people who were like, "Man, nursing school is tough. Are you sure you want to do that?"
yep,
If I didn't believe in myself and believe that I could,
yep,
I would not have become a nurse. I would have not started the nonprofit. I would not be here today. I would
yeah.
not be here today. So I'm so glad that
And
I did.
it is
It
hard,
is.
but there are people that have done it before and
Nobody's
they've
better than
started
you.
those steps.
Yes.
Yes, and it's like, so you're saying that I can't do it? I know I can do it.
Yes.
I know I have the strength and the passion and the drive to do it. The difference between me and the other person that failed is nothing, but
Right.
everything. And I'll
Absolutely.
push. And it's like sometimes people are like, oh, well, you won't become a millionaire, or you won't do this, or you won't do that. It's really difficult to do this. Yes, but somebody's done it before.
Right.
So what's stopping me
They're
from
not
being the
better
next
than
one to do
me.
it?
Absolutely. Look, Janine,
No.
I'm actually in the middle of writing so I have authored a book before, but I'm writing my first ebook right now. It's called The 9 Things I Wish My Mother Had Taught Me, the tools that build
Mm,
my confidence. And we've touched on so many of the things that are in the book, but one of the biggies is nobody is
yeah.
better than you. Nobody
Yeah.
is better than you. I wish I had
Yeah.
heard that one time as a child. And now I tell
Yes.
kids all the time when I go and when I'm paid to go to schools or volunteer, I volunteered to speak at schools to inspire them, and I share my story. I tell them and I look in their eyes. There is nothing like looking a little girl in her eyes and telling her, "Listen, nobody's better than you." I've had girls cry
Yeah.
spontaneously from me telling them that, or just give me the biggest smile like,
I would
"Wow."
know grown women that would
Yeah.
cry.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Like,
yeah. Grown women
yeah.
have actually. It's so true because
Yes.
nobody is better than
Yeah.
you. You're no better than anyone else, but nobody's better than you. Why can't I be the one? Why can't I be the one to
Yeah.
try? Why can't I be the one to do it? And why can't I be the one to succeed? Just because I didn't
Yeah.
have the army of support behind me, or the familial wealth, or the privilege. I had nothing, but guess
Yeah.
what? I'm still good enough.
Yep. I 100%, like, I lived on the streets before and all of that, and it's like when I had when I had my niece come and visit and stuff like that, she was here and she was looking around because we have 3 dogs and she loves dogs. She's like, "Oh," she would say, "You guys are so lucky to have this. You're so lucky to have the dogs. You're so lucky for this." I'm like, "Sweetie, it's not luck. I
Worked
bust my
for
ass for
this.
this. I work hard for
Yep.
this. Nothing in my life is luck. It is determination
100%.
and drive
Yes.
and passion
Yes.
and love.
Yes.
And you can have this and more. Just decide what you want to go for
Yes.
and go for
Right.
it."
It is not luck. It
Like,
is not luck at
no,
all. Everything you have, you worked for.
no.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Very true.
And you're constantly working for it. Like, it's like I have the podcast or I have my business or I have all these things. And it's like, that's even like in relationships. Relationships are work. Like, I don't take for granted anymore my friendships. Whereas I just always
Had
assumed
friends.
that people would
Yeah.
be there for
Yeah.
me. Yeah. And it's having that community of friends, of people that I make a point of connecting with now. And it's like somebody's like, "Oh, you're so lucky to have really good friends."
I
No, I've
work
worked
I work
really
at those.
hard.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
it's so funny that you mentioned friends because a couple nights ago I'd been meaning to do a TikTok to explain to give some inspiration about friends for kids who struggle who don't have friends. And so I was sharing this story about,
Yep.
I told you I was the mentor for this, my class, everybody knew me. So I had so many friends, right? And so I remember standing
Yes.
in the middle of the soccer field, and I would be in the middle and I would stretch out my hand, and from post to post we would reach. That's how many friends I had in the soccer field. But
Yeah.
now I have a handful of ride or dies, and maybe even
Yes.
less than that of people that I know no matter what will be there for me.
Yeah.
And so I was just sharing
Yeah.
that when you have kids who are sad, they don't have friends, etc., it's okay. Because for me, the best, strongest, most profound relationships I made when I was a young woman, you know?
Yep. Yeah, I only made my friends in the last like 4
There you
years,
go.
and they're friendships that I feel like I have had my
Your whole
entire
life.
life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And it's so much
It's
deeper
so much
than
deeper because
it's
when you're young, your friendships are like surface level, right? Oh, I like this boy. Oh, I wear this makeup. Oh, you know, cute
and
stuff.
mildly abusive
Yes.
sometimes. Like, teenage girls are mean.
Yes. Yes.
They're
Absolutely.
horrible to each other.
Abrasive. Yes. Very true. And so
Yes.
as a
And
woman, it's very
it was
different.
like, yeah. And it was like every time with friendships, it felt like we were in competition against each other all the time.
Hmm.
And so all of us were like underhandedly beating each other
Down.
down.
Yeah. Low key
And
hating is what
it
we
was
say.
just
Low key hating. Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I yeah, like you said, I have a really close knit group of friends that, we all have our shit. And yeah, sometimes I need to vent, sometimes you do too, and that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can't compare the relationships. I mean,
Mhm.
every now and then I have a friend who has a friend from when they were little, but I feel like that, that's a very powerful friendship. But I feel like that's rare because the relationships we make
Yes.
as women are very different than
Yeah.
the relationships we make as children, as girls, you know,
Yeah, it's more common in men, I find, to
their
have
childhood
childhood
besties.
friendships.
Yeah.
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 I'm like, this is insane. Like, you've known this person for
Your
like
whole
40
life.
years. That's crazy.
Yeah, they're not like us though. I mean, I hate to generalize, but typically they're not like us where we
Yeah.
can, make friends sort of older. Like one of my besties I made in my early 30s,
Yes.
whereas like the men I know, they're very cool with their like childhood friends and just sort of surface level with men they've met as men, you know. So
Yes.
interesting how that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I go into the deep dives with my friendships sometimes. It's like, yeah, we can go out and do stuff, but at the same time like I love to just you come over,
Yeah.
we'll have a cup of coffee, cup of tea and chat
Yeah.
and we will dive into every aspect of your life.
Right.
And it's like I love
So
that.
much more profound. Yeah, it's so profound.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very true.
No, it's just I love it. So right. I'm trying to think. Was there hmm I'd say when you jumping back into like the charity and all that, the
Yeah.
nonprofit and everything, when you first went back, what were your feelings like the first time you went back there? And
First time
yeah,
I went back to Ghana. So the
yeah,
first time I went back, so I arrived at 15. I didn't go back until I was 21
yeah,
because no one was going to take me, right? When I lived with them. And then when I left them, I left with 20 bucks in my pocket. So I had to
yeah,
hustle. I was hustling
yes,
to survive, like literally hustling. I mean,
yeah,
so I didn't go back till I was 21. And of course, it was on a credit card, but at least I had a credit card that had some wiggle room on it. And
yes,
when I went back home, I was I was in this sort of space where it felt like home but didn't. I felt very much a fish out of
yeah,
water because you see the thing is I arrived at such a formative age. I had become a bit American, 7 years or so, right? Is that 15 to 21? Yeah.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I had become Americanized, if you will, westernized. I had also lived through so much pain and had
yeah,
no support through that pain. So I was in a strange space. I also didn't feel the warm and fuzzies when I got home. It was just an awkward feeling and I had to work through all of that. I didn't work through much of it until I was much older. So the first visit was
yeah,
fun. I mean, I got to see my siblings and that's awesome, but it didn't feel necessarily like home. Um, it wasn't until I had made some peace with a lot of my childhood and my, running away and all that. When I went back,
yeah,
probably the first mission trip for Earth Angels was
yeah.
when I felt very much at peace, at home. And that was in 2019. I took a group of
Wow.
folks who wanted to go and I'd been a few times between 21 and then, but
Yeah.
the best feeling, okay, I feel like I'm home and I was happy to be there. Wasn't
Mhm.
triggered as much. Maybe that's what, a therapist would say.
Yeah.
I just, it was happy. I was happy. I had people with me. I had people who loved me with me. And so, that was an amazing trip. I took people who their lives will be forever changed coming to work with me at the time. I didn't have the farm, I was working at
Yeah.
this hospital supplies and I had just rewired their entire maternity ward because their electricity was so poor. They were like having fires and stuff in their unit. And so Earth
Jeez.
Angels had just paid for the ward to be totally redone so they could have safe deliveries. And so my team came with me, some volunteers, and we went in there and got to meet some of the laboring patients and the people that we had helped for a while. So that was an incredible trip, epic trip. And I hope to revisit that this year. Hopefully I can make another trip happen.
Yeah, that would be amazing, especially yeah, you have so much going on there now,
Yes.
and going to see the fish farm and
Yeah,
everything
and
too would
rolling
be
up our
amazing.
sleeves, and because we're trying to do so many things. We're
Yeah.
planting trees to do some, carbon emission. Trying to what's the word? Take off, for lack of a better term, eliminate or negate some of the carbon emissions that the farm itself is going to emit, right, by just having a farm.
Yeah.
So, trying to plant trees, trying to make it a community thing. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be an amazing trip when I can make it happen.
Yeah. So, what's been like one of the most challenging things for you with the nonprofit so far?
I would say the hardest job I did was getting the uh, Syrian refugees supplies in Lebanon. That was the biggest
Mm,
challenge. We finally got to them. I had sent a truckload of coats because these refugees were in tents in the mountains, in Lebanon. It was cold.
yeah.
So I got coats, I did a shoe
Yeah.
drive, I got clothes, I sent formula, all of this stuff. I had formula sent from the hospital I worked at because they donated it because they didn't need all this amount. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, the red tape I had to go through to get the supplies where they needed to be, all
Yeah.
because the formula is considered a prescription and I didn't have a prescription with me. And so they weren't going to let the formula go. And it was a back and forth battle. It took months for the supplies to reach the Syrians. And
That's
that was heartbreaking. It
ridiculous.
finally got to them, but it was awful. And I think I had to sign off that the formula could stay behind. They had to toss all of that formula I'd sent to those poor babies, but the clothes and the coats and shoes, all of that was able to get to them. The second thing that comes to mind is this hospital I worked with in Ghana. The hospital itself functions fine, but they had a part of a wing of the hospital that was supposed to be for OR, like surgery, and the building never
Yeah.
got completed for whatever reason. It
Jeez.
never got completed. So they have no OR. So they have to
Yeah.
send all of their patients who need surgery across town, and the ambulance services suck over there. That's why my parents both
Yeah.
died young, was because the healthcare was so crappy. I mean, it's a little better, but it was really bad. So
Yeah.
the ambulance services are pretty much non-existent. So patients are dying on their way from this hospital to get
Yeah.
surgery elsewhere. And I tried and tried and tried to get the paperwork needed to complete this OR for them, but they could never provide
Yeah.
me what I needed to start the process. And it was another case of red tape where, like, go to this
Yeah.
person, go to that person, crawl, all these hoops, and I could never get it done. So that was probably the second two of the most difficult journeys I've had. Um, Another one was in Botswana, some work I did in this village. We were helping out the children in the village, and one of the girls was raped by some men in the village, 7-year-old girl, and that was incredibly
God.
difficult. And fortunately, we were able to get her medical care, and Earth Angels paid for all of that. Help the family as
Yeah.
much as we could. But yeah, there's a lot of painful stuff
Yeah.
you see in the charity space for sure.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's just difficult when you're sitting there sometimes and you're like, all I'm trying to do is help right now.
Yes.
Like, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm trying to help build a building. I'm trying to help save lives with
Yeah.
formula. And they're like, no.
Right.
It's like,
Very, yeah.
like I'm just
Yeah.
helping. Like, I'm not hurting
Right.
anybody. I'm not like, come over to the dark side and believe all my religious beliefs. I'm like, I'm just trying to help
Literally trying
you.
to help.
Like, that's
And as
it.
the person receiving the
Yeah.
formula, it's like, couldn't you let that go to help some babies? Couldn't you? So yeah, it's been
Yes.
very frustrating. Those were some really difficult ones, but some really funny and very annoying things that have happened were twice, Janine. You won't believe this. It reminds me of our conversation about really God or really universe.
Yeah.
Years ago, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, I got a call from the Queen Latifah show saying they had heard about me and that they wanted to get me on the show. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, can you imagine how Earth Angels would
Yeah.
blow up if we got on a syndicated show, right? That, like, all I want is for Earth
Yes.
Angels to be lucrative and help as many people as possible, right? 2 weeks
Yeah.
later, the show closed down. The show shut down. That's one. That's
Oh my
one of them, okay?
God.
Second one, in 2021, I got an email from the Drew Barrymore show. Hey, is this
Oh,
Hanan? We've
geez.
heard about you. We've heard about Earth Angels. We would love for you to come on this show. I was like, holy shit, no way. Drew Barrymore, like,
Yes.
what? Right? And
Yes.
so they were going to do like a nurses doing good story. And
Yeah.
they interviewed me twice. They seemed to love me. And they ended up going with another nurse who was doing local work. So I think they just needed like local people. But man, that was so
Yeah.
painful. Like, imagine being on the Drew Barrymore show. So there have been some things like
That would be incredible. I love her.
that too. I grew up with her. Like, we're similar. I
Love
think she's a
her.
few years older than me.
Yes.
But like, I grew up watching Firestarter. Like Drew's like my low key
Yes.
homie.
So good. I joking, like, my friends joke because I love fire, and I'm like, yeah, no, that should basically be my nickname at this point, because it's
Firestarter.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I love that, and that's not a movie that most people know, but that was like,
Yeah.
I love
Oh, it
that
was
movie
so
so
good. I,
much,
I used to think I could
so
burn people
good.
when they like pissed me off like she did.
Yes. I have like the worst temper when I was younger, so I'm like, I'm just gonna make people
Yeah.
explode.
There you go. I imagine that all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Love
Uh,
Drew. So those
yeah.
were, I would say, overall, my very painful experiences. But I have
Yeah.
to, on my 9 out of 10 days, I remind myself, maybe
Yeah.
it wasn't ready to blow up. Maybe, it wasn't my time or whatever. But there is.
Mentally and emotionally, like, would you be able to have dealt with it at the capacity it would have gotten to at that point?
Right, right. True, true.
Like,
Yeah, yeah. And then there's the one
yeah,
day where I'm like, hell yeah, I would have. Like, why didn't it happen? So it is what it is. I mean, I've come
yeah,
to accept it, but yeah, very painful at the time.
yeah. So, I guess one of my last questions would be, what would be something that is either a misconception about Ghana or something that you wish that more people knew?
I think people overall are hearing great things about Ghana the past several years. Like, it's really gotten on the
Mm,
map as one of the most hospitable African nations, West African nations. Very safe. Ghana is very safe, and the
yes.
people are so kind. I mean, they really welcome you. They love foreigners and tourists. And tourism is a big part of the economic structure there. So
Yeah.
I want to say people know that by now. Like, people on TikTok, I see videos all the time. I think there was a Super Bowl commercial about Accra. So it's definitely on the map. Like, people are known and
Yeah.
hearing, and a lot of celebrities have visited. Beyonce, Jay-Z, a lot of people have visited, and
Yes.
so it's given Ghana some light. And I would say all of those things are true. It is so fun. It's definitely a place you want to go to relax. It's has the Jamaican vibe,
Yeah.
kind of slow, beach life. It's
Yeah.
tropical. Um, and just a really good time. Whenever I go, it's painful to come back because it's sort of like
Yeah.
kind of laissez-faire, slow life, especially when
Hmm.
you're going on vacation. Now, granted, there is a lot of poverty and there is a lot of suffering still,
Yep.
so of course,
Yeah.
a lot of work to be done. Um, but overall, I would say, great country, great nation, very kind people, very receiving, receptive, welcoming. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was something in a few of the videos that you did have a couple people talking about their experience there and stuff that came and volunteered with you and
Yes.
everything. And just how happy they were. They were like, everybody here was so amazing
Yes.
and so happy to be around. And that was, yeah, it was really nice to kind of hear that.
Yeah.
And
You'll see kids on the
yeah,
street selling oranges and they have a big old smile and, just happy. Like it's
yeah,
a happy, overall, I would say a happy
yeah,
nation, regardless of you know, um, all of the things that need improving, healthcare, the
yeah,
poverty rate, all of that. But the people are
yeah.
just very over, just happy,
They're grateful.
grateful. You see people dancing on the
Yeah,
side of the road
yeah,
and it's like, 95 degrees and maybe they'll eat today, maybe not, but they're happy. And
yeah.
that is probably, I would say, the one thing you'll notice as soon as you land, you'll be greeted with big old smiles and, just you feel welcomed.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, it would be nice if it kind of, if you're able to get more help there too, because it's, yeah, they're just grateful for what they have, even though a lot of us look at them like, oh my God, again, it's putting your perceptions on it. You would be so much happier if you had this, 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 and
Right.
this. And it's like, no, they just want to be able to feed themselves
Right.
today.
Yeah.
That's
Shelter,
it.
food, and they're
Yeah.
happy. They're
Yeah.
humble. They're a humble people. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a
Yes.
lot of wealth in Ghana. Some of the richest people I know
Yeah.
live there, actually, you know.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of wealth, but it is the third
Mm.
world paradigm where there's a lot of wealth and there's just as much of an extreme in the other direction.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Like I'm in Canada and I live in Kelowna, BC. And it's crazy because we have people that are multimillionaires and a lot of homeless people.
Oh,
And it's like it's insane. Like our homeless population over the last couple of years has gone and skyrocketed. Like it's been really intense. But the honestly, the amount of $1 million homes that we have is ridiculous.
surpasses.
Like our
Yeah.
housing, yeah, our housing is way over the top when it comes to costs and stuff because we're close to Vancouver.
Mm,
And so it's like we're about 4 hours away. And yeah, it's insane.
yeah.
Like most people live in $1 million home, and then the other chunk of people are homeless. And
Ooh,
it's
it's
like,
like third
what is
world
happening?
dynamic.
Like, it's so
That's
weird.
so weird.
And it's like, people, yeah. And it's like people are charging way too much for rent as part of it. So people are ending up on the streets because they can't afford
The rent
basic rent
prices,
because
geez, it,
the rent prices are higher than like what minimum
it
wage for
pays.
somebody is.
Yeah, it's
It's
funny because in the
brutal.
States, all we hear about is how amazing Canada is and how the citizens get it, so good. So that's an interesting,
It's in some places
right?
sometimes, and it's again, it's not that we don't have it good in a lot of ways, but at the same
A
time,
lot of
there's
room to grow.
always,
Yeah,
yes, a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, of course.
And
And that's with
it's,
everything.
yeah,
Yeah,
even, yeah, it's like even like with our healthcare and stuff, it's like, sure, we kind of have technically free healthcare, but with that, you have no options.
right. Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah,
So it's like, yeah, it's brutal. Sometimes I would have wished being able to like pay for my healthcare because then I'm like, oh, I could choose this,
yeah.
this, this, or
Need a
this instead of just
cardiologist?
what's
I can
handed
call
to
one
me.
tomorrow. Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Whereas like, oh, even actually for an OB, like for me to get an OB, I need a signed doctor's note saying that I need an OB. I
What?
literally had a male doctor when I oh God, I was so mad. I literally had one of my miscarriages in the doctor's office waiting to see them. And I was like, I need to go and see an OB. This is to the point where like I've had multiple miscarriages. It's taken me years to get pregnant. I really want to go and have an appointment with an OB.
Yeah.
I don't have one right now. And he was like, well, and I'm like, and I need a signed doctor to say, to like prescribe me that I'm a woman and I need an
What?
OB. And he's like, no, you don't need an OB. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, you need a fertility clinic. And he prescribed me a fertility clinic. I was like, are you
Oh.
effing kidding me right now?
So,
And they
so
won't
what
see
about
you until you
PAPs?
do blood work. I'm like,
What about when you need a PAP when you're sexually
your
active?
your family doctor can do it.
Oh,
Yeah.
ew. I don't want my
Yeah.
family doc
I know.
doing my PAPs and breast exam. That's odd.
No, it's they're a general
Right.
practitioner, so they do generally pretty much anything unless there's an issue, and then you would get prescribed to like
Oh,
go
that
to an
is
OB. And
interesting.
it's like,
Here, the family docs don't do that.
it's
OBs do everything OB related.
which I thought they would too here, until again I was asking and I was like, okay, so I need this, and they're like, oh, you can't get one unless you are told by your doctor that you need
Oh
one. I'm
yeah.
like,
So there's
but I was told as a
yeah.
kid, like,
That, so
what?
yeah, there's definitely drawbacks to how you have it. I mean, everything has its pros and cons. We pay too much. I mean, for me and my two boys, I pay $500 a month just to have health care, and we're taxed,
Yep.
right? But for you, on the flip
Yeah.
side, you don't. But then you have to sort of, you
You have no
yes,
options.
you have to do what you're told.
You literally have
Yeah.
to, you have to do what you're told or talk your doctor
Into it.
into your side of
Like
things.
begging.
Like, I feel like I need blood work for this. Yeah. And if they say
It's a
no,
done deal. You have to find a new doc, or
yeah.
can you not just get a new doc?
Well, at least I have a good doctor now. She's awesome. She's really helpful.
Good.
Yeah, there were multiple times, during everything, because I know my next stages is going to a fertility clinic and all of that. And I told her, I was like, I don't even want to go to a fertility clinic. This was like last summer, because I was like, I couldn't imagine me trying to carry a baby. Like, that would be, if I lost it, there's no coming back for me from that. And like, the stress and the anxiety and everything. She's like, okay, so let's take a step back and be like, for right now, I can't carry a baby. And I'm like, yeah, I can change my mindset on that for right now. Yeah, for right now, I can't do that. I'm not saying I couldn't later on. Right now, I just can't.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So thankfully, I did find a good doctor before all of this happened. And
yeah, that's important for sure.
Yeah.
One who actually listens.
Yeah, a lot of the people in this city too, part of the problem is there isn't enough general practitioner family doctors. So everybody's on waiting lists that can take years to actually get a family doctor. So if anything's wrong, you have to go to basically a walk-in clinic, which is always pre-booked. It's packed. You're not getting in. So then you have to go to the hospital. And it's like, we're wasting so much like time and everything, because you're like, okay, well, I'm sick. I need a doctor's note to say I'm sick so I can have the day off of work, which I now have to pay for. And it's just absurd.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear that feedback. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's...
I guess you
picked... Yeah, it was actually... Yeah, it was really funny, because I was not somebody who would go to the doctors for almost anything when I was younger. Like, it was like, I can fix it myself. It's fine. Right. To the point where one of the first times I was in the hospital, the guy's like, did you just move here? And I'm like, no. And he's like, then you're pretty healthy. And I'm like, why? He's like, you have like one of the thinnest files I've ever seen for somebody who actually lives here.
Right, because you hadn't never been.
I was like, oh.
You had never been. Yeah.
No. I had no other surgeries. I had no other major anythings really, for the most part. But like the ailments I did have, I just wouldn't go to the doctor for them. Yeah. I was like,
yeah.
yeah, it was just hilarious. I was like, whatever, like my throat's sore. I don't need to go to the doctor to tell me
100%.
my throat's sore.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take care of it
I'm
myself.
the same way. I mean, I grew up, I had malaria
Yeah.
several times. I mean, it became like having a cold. So, yeah, I mean, unless there's
Yeah.
a bleeding mass, and like you, I know my body very well. I don't just jump
Yep.
to, to go to the doctor. And then thank God I have all this medical knowledge before having my kids because, man, that's a whole nother story of knowing when to take them, when not to take them, when you can just nurse them versus take them.
Yes.
So being a nurse has really saved me from taking my kids to the doctor a lot of times because if it's a virus, it's Tylenol, rest, and fluids. I mean, there's really nothing they can do for you,
Yes.
So
Yeah.
thank God I've been able to care for my kids. Knock on wood, they haven't been to the doctor much except for well visits. Um, so
Yes.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. That's just. Oh. So, is there anything else that you kind of want to touch on? I have a couple key questions that I ask everybody at the very end that are more of a rapid fire
Yeah.
question that we'll dive
Okay.
into. But yeah, I'll put all of your social things in the
Thank
comments. I'll
you.
put donation links and your TikTok stuff, which is
Thank
awesome.
you.
And yeah,
I guess, this is my first Canadian podcast. I think it would be nice for your audience to know that I would love some speaking opportunities in Canada. I've been a couple times, but very brief
yeah,
visits. So if my story moves you out there, or, just to know
hmm,
that I would love to come out, share my story, inspire children, women,
yes,
whomever, if I can help people with my narrative. So, and that's what I'm slowly moving into, even though I still have my
yeah,
nursing gig. Ideally, in the next several months, I am a full time speaker, Earth Angels, and, and that's
yeah.
it. I mean, like, that's hopefully the trajectory that I'm headed on. And so, yeah, I'm open to all sorts of opportunities and would love to come out there and share and inspire as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm really hoping, like, I know there's a few of my friends that would probably contact you and stuff too because I'm just
Eee!
like it's
I love that.
so I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
Oh, so awesome. Okay, so I will ask you the random rapid fire questions that just I created because of my curiosity
Yeah,
and entertainment.
shoot.
Okay. So what is or wow, which would you rather do? Watch a movie or read a book?
Watch a movie.
Hmm. What is your favorite season of the year?
Fall.
Hmm. Do you prefer sweet or savory?
Savory.
And what's your favorite plant?
Lily.
That's amazing. My dog's name is Lily, and one of my first tattoo I had a lily, and the tattoo I have with my mom is also a
Oh,
lily.
oh
I
my
love
gosh,
lilies.
this is serendipitous.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
Stargazer Lily is the first gift that I
Mm,
received when I had Ramsey. The first person that brought me flowers was a Stargazer Lily, and the smell permeated my room. And every time I smell them, even though that experience was traumatic, I
yeah.
knew he was alive. I knew he was well, and I felt just the zenest feeling from the smell of that. And every time I
Yes.
smell it, I'm like, oh, my baby is okay. So Stargazer Lily is my favorite
Yeah.
plant of all time. I love plants. I love that question.
I love that. Yes. I'm obsessed. So
Aw,
yeah. What is the best place you've ever been?
Santorini, Greece.
Interesting.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Dark blue
I find
Mediterranean
Greece.
waters, black sands from the lava rock that have broken 3,500 years ago. Absolutely stunning island to
Jeez.
visit. Oh my goodness. Santorini, Greece,
God, that would be amazing.
gorgeous.
I love Greece. I'm just fascinated by like all of its
Oh,
culture and
it's
stuff
so
too.
beautiful.
Like,
And then, of course,
yeah.
Athens, the Acropolis. I mean, walking in
Yes.
Athens, boom, 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 I'm
Yep.
buying stuff in the market. And then all of a sudden, the Acropolis, it's like, what? Amazing, amazing.
I know. I know. That's yeah, I'm obsessed with mythology. So I'm like
It's so
that would
incredible.
just be incredible to go there.
Yes,
Like, oh.
yes.
What is your favorite form of body movement?
I would say dance. I taught belly dance. That was one of my hustling gigs. I taught belly dancing for years. When Shakira had just hit the scene and everybody wanted to learn, I was like, "Ooh, I can."
Yeah.
It can be my side gig. I can teach girls on the weekend, and I within a few
Yeah.
days, I formed the steps. I named all the steps because really in belly dance there are no steps. In the Arab world, the little
Yes.
girls learn to dance as like toddlers. At parties, you just get up and you dance. And by the time you're a woman, you know how to
Yeah.
dance. That's just kind of how it goes. At least I can speak for the Lebanese culture. So there were no steps. But when I had to teach it, I had to
Yes.
make steps. So I created a whole dance routine, steps, and everything. And belly dance comes so easy for me, especially being growing up in Africa, West Africa. Everything is a dance. Carpenters, even
Yeah.
when you hear carpenters in like on the road doing work, they hit their nails with a beat so that the noise sounds
That's
good
awesome.
to the community versus noise pollution.
Yeah.
So I would say belly dance. I mean, it comes so easy to me. It's just sort of part of me.
Yeah. Love that. What is your preferred way to manage stress and overwhelm?
I love to run. I walk every single day. Um, I would say working out is probably my favorite. Working out with dance, running, walking, etc. Yeah,
Mm. What's your favorite type of music?
Afro beats.
That's awesome.
100%. I'm an Afrobeat
Uh,
girl.
yeah, that's so good. Uh, and then what's the best mythical creature?
Ooh, I would say now at this stage, I would say Medusa is my.
Nice.
When I think about great women, I would say I would have loved to meet Medusa and asked her why she was so pissed, but I also would kind of guess the
I
answer.
understand why she was
I
so
would guess
pissed.
the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And like Drew, she could
Uh,
just turn people to stone, like instead of fire. I'd like one of those powers. Yeah,
yes, that would be
good
amazing.
question.
And the last, the last one is what is one of your greatest accomplishments so far?
I believe my greatest accomplishment, hands down, is how I've raised my kids.
Mm,
Hands down, how I've raised my kids to be fearless, to be free, to be, when I was little, all I wanted was a little girl of my own. I always wanted a girl. Why? Because I could raise her to be free, unapologetic herself,
yeah.
have all of the mothering that I never had and just unconditionally, stupidly loved. And then, of course, God gave me two
Yeah.
boys. And
Of
of
course.
course, Murphy's Law. and and
Yeah.
so, but I love that because now they are that way. And I've given all of that to them. I have given these children my all. And so they will be smarter than
Yes.
me, they will be better than me, they will know more. They're and I don't want to sound like that mom. I tried not to do that during this, only because you ask. But they are, my son is 13 going on 30 in terms of
Mm.
knowledge and wisdom and lessons
Yep.
and all of things. And so I would say, yes, that is number one. I think my greatest accomplishment is the kind of mother I am and the kind of relationship I have with my children.
Yeah, that's super important, especially like you said, you wanted a girl initially to mother and care for. It's really important to know that the men in our society really need that too.
100%.
Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it wasn't until I think a couple years into like realizing I wasn't going to have a girl and knowing I was done, and I just realized, you know what? I I needed to give this to these boys, and they needed
Yes.
this from me, and alas, I have given it all to them, and it's a beautiful thing. Like you said, we make our plans, we
Yeah.
make our minds, and then life changes it up for us. And so it was them too
Yeah.
that were meant to be here and to get all of it from me. And so yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
And knowing that also if they choose to have female partners, you'll end up with
Oh
daughters.
my gosh.
And it's like,
I would love that. They would
yeah.
be the most
And
spoiled
yeah,
daughters-in-law or whatever partners ever. Like
yeah,
they'll be like, "Can we just live at your house? We want to be
yeah,
mom's kid."
right?
Yeah, no, I just love them.
Yeah,
I wanted these kids. I really, knew that I wanted to give all of this to them, and so it's all been very like intentional parenting.
yeah.
So yeah, I hope that they do meet female partners one day, only because I want a bunch of daughters.
Yeah.
A bunch
You're
of
like, I want
a bunch
daughters.
of grandkids. But yeah, whether they're straight or gay, I don't care. But yeah, I
Yes.
would love granddaughters,
Yeah.
daughters-in-law, whatever. It'd be awesome.
And even if they're gay,
They
they
can
can
adopt.
adopt.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's,
yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, so many grandkids running around would
Oh,
be
I would
amazing.
love that. Oh my gosh, I would love. And they know that. They always joke around like,
Yeah.
"Mommy, you're going to take our kids when we have them."
And you'll appreciate it
Oh
when
my
you have them.
gosh, you'll actually
Trust
have a
me.
grandma
You,
who helps and, dotes on them and
yes.
sees them and adores them. I mean, yeah, I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they go through the first few years of having a new baby, they'll be like, Mom, please come over.
Oh
I'm
my
begging you.
gosh. And
Like,
and they have a mom who was,
yeah.
NICU nurse, mother baby nurse, like L&D,
Yes.
all of that. And so I've seen it all and
Yep.
yeah, I'll roll my sleeves up and be like, "Baby boy, I got you. I'm right here."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on. I was looking forward to this interview more than anything lately.
This has
Like,
been amazing. It's been
yeah.
really good chatting with you, Janine. Thank you so much for giving me your platform and
Yeah.
sharing this space with me. I really am grateful and appreciate it so much. And I hope we get to do this again in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I was just like, oh, I'll have you on again for
Yeah.
sure. Because I was like, oh, I'm just excited to kind of see, like you said, where you're going this year and the journey that's going to happen. Like, I'm very excited to watch it kind of unfold for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Likewise. We'll keep in touch.
Oh, God, yeah. Amazing. Well, we'll say bye for now.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
See you later.
Bye. Again, I want to thank Hanan Merabi so much for coming on this week's episode of the Wild Nova podcast. If you would like to find more from her, please head over to her Instagram, I am Hanan, her Facebook, Hanan Merabi, or her TikTok, Hanan Merabi. All of the links to her social media and websites and a donation link to Earth's Angels will all be in the show notes. If you found any resonance in today's discussion, don't forget to share, subscribe, and leave a review. Your engagement really means a lot to me. Connect with me on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at the Wild Nova Podcast. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@wildnova.ca. And as always, visit my website for any additional resources at wildnova.ca. I'm your host, Janine O'Brien. Remember, the connection between your body, mind, and spirit is a journey worth embracing. So until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.